The whole world is lost. What is he talking about? He's talking about ethnic cleansing.
No, he's not. He's literally telling the people. That quote reinforces everything I'm saying.
Attributing enough weight to the Zionist transfer predisposition in explaining what actually happened in Palestine in 1948.
You understand that transfer is not the same thing as ethnic cleansing, right?
You understand that Benny Morris has said that it's ethnic cleansing and that that's his euphemism.
Hold on, no. You understand that, like,
Yes,
for
yes.
instance, so wait,
You want me-
if they would have accepted Partition 181, is that ethnic cleansing?
What's Partition 181?
If UN General Assembly Resolution 181, which is the official
181
name given to the 1947
Yeah, not
Partition Plan,
Yes.
yes, it was the Partition Plan. Okay,
Right.
if they would have accepted that, would that have been? Would you have considered that ethnic cleansing?
Absolutely not, because the resolution specifically said not to do that. It said to protect the
It
minorities.
didn't
within your
explicitly
state.
say not to do. Ethnic cleansing doesn't even exist as a term, so why would it explicitly say
They
not to
didn't
do
use
that?
Now it should just be my PowerPoint.
Good.
Yeah?
It
You
is.
seeing it? Okay.
And also, one thing that I want to mention
Oh man,
is
I muted it. Oh boy, boys. There's a Harvard guy.
when you
Oh, no.
happen to there you
Oh
go.
no.
Once you get done showing your slides, if you
Yeah.
can do me a favor, just like you did, and take it down. I can do it on
course.
my end, but all right, cool. So let me just double check this is good.
Destiny, what are you on the East Coast?
Yeah, East Coast.
Wait, would you say West Coast?
East Coast, sorry.
Oh, East Coast. Okay.
You like living in Miami, Steven. You must like it somewhat. You've been
Oh,
there for
you're
a
in
while.
Miami. Okay.
I mean, I got people here, yeah.
Would you recommend it?
I sit aside all day on the computer, so don't ask me for a place recommendation.
Let's see. Perfect. We're set. So here I go. Thanks for being here, guys. This is fun. And there we go. Cool. 3, 2, 1. Ready, set, here I go. Hey, everybody. Today we're debating Israel versus Palestine. Who is more at fault? And we are starting right now with Javad's opening statement. Thanks for being with us. Javad, the floor is all yours. Dr. Hashmi.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen. So if you could just give me 1 second to set that up. All right. You should be able to see my PowerPoint now.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to begin. So my overall thesis is quite simple. Zionism is the primary cause of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict because it is an ongoing settler colonial project, which by its very nature creates and perpetuates conflict with the indigenous population that it seeks to violently replace and to create in its stead a Europeanized Jewish majority ethno-nationalist state. The Zionist project is analogous to other settler colonial projects, such as the European conquest of Native American lands and of South Africa, which involved ethnic cleansing, occupation, genocide, politicide, and apartheid. Stephen doesn't like to call it settler colonialism and confuses the term with imperialism and classical colonialism, but settler colonialism is a technical term used by experts in the field, and it's only within this framework of settler colonialism that you can truly understand the conflict. Stephen doesn't like the word because it gives the game away. No reasonable person today blames the Native Americans for what happened to them, and 100 years from now, the same will be the case for the Palestinians. Under settler colonialism, native populations are subjected to ethnic cleansing, another term that Stephen doesn't like, so he denies and downplays it. But the reality is that you can't establish a Jewish majority ethno-nationalist state in Palestine when the population is overwhelmingly Arab. The only way to create a super majority of Jews, which is what Zionists demanded, is to ethnically cleanse the indigenous population, or what Zionists euphemistically refer to as transfer, which, contrary to Destiny's past claims, was overwhelmingly endorsed by the Zionist leadership. Israel was thus created in sin, born in an act of massive ethnic cleansing, the Nakba, which resulted in 700,000 refugees and involved the destruction of over 500 Palestinian villages. 90% of Palestinians in Israel proper were thereby eliminated, creating the supermajority of Jews, without which the Jewish state of Israel could not have come into existence. Israel is a supremacist ethnocracy in which the state apparatus is controlled by Israeli Jews, who use it to further their own interests, power, dominance, and resources over and above the Arab minority. Consistent with Zionist propaganda, Stephen stresses that Israel is a democracy and makes the absolutely fallacious claim that the so-called Arab Israelis have equal rights under the law, employing the same arguments as defenders of apartheid South Africa, who claimed that South African blacks had a higher standard of living than surrounding states. As numerous human rights groups attest to, such as Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and Israel's own B'Tselem, Israel as it exists today is an apartheid state. Of course, this is yet another word that Stephen does not like because, again, it gives the game away. Nobody today would be on the side of apartheid South Africa. The next term Stephen definitely won't like is politicide, which is what Israel has been doing since the first Nakba all the way to today's second Nakba in Gaza. The Zionist version of Manifest Destiny, Eretz Israel and Greater Israel, precludes the acceptance of a sovereign Palestinian state, something rejected by every single Israeli prime minister and administration throughout Israel's 76-year history. Instead, the goal is to herd the Palestinians into smaller and smaller reservations, as was done to the Native Americans or to the blacks in South Africa, to create autonomous Bantustans. As Destiny's favorite Israeli historian Benny Morris puts it, Palestinians need to be put in a cage. Destiny attributes the failure to reach a peace settlement to the Arabs and Palestinians, who he portrays as being religiously, culturally, and socially prone to violence. They just don't want peace, are fundamentally anti-Semitic, are hungry for wars, display an inability to engage in diplomacy, and in any case cannot be reasoned with. However, contrary to this no partner for peace Zionist trope, it is in fact Israeli violence, intransigence, and its strategic peace obstructionism that prevents a peaceful resolution to the conflict. This is due to the foundational Zionist Israeli opposition to the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state, which logically precludes a peaceful two-state resolution. Finally, I will argue that the Zionist endorsement of the two-state solution is a chimera, designed to indefinitely sustain the status quo, ever with the hopes of a final solution, a future fuller ethnic cleansing under the cover of war, in order to complete the settler colonial project. This is the context of the current Gaza crisis. Like Benny Morris, Stephen publicly supports the two-state solution, even as he thinks, and perhaps even hopes, that ethnic cleansing is inevitable. Honestly, he says, I'm pro-genocide. Palestinians can go live in another place. His interlocutor asked rhetorically, so the Palestinians can, quote, Native American the F out of there? This eloquently sums it up for you, the Zionist logic. As the founder of revisionist Zionism, Ze'ev Jabotinsky, put it in 1923, quote, it is utterly impossible to obtain the voluntary consent of the Palestine Arabs for converting Palestine from an Arab country into a country with a Jewish majority. The native populations have always stubbornly resisted the colonists. The native population of the Americas fought the European pioneers with the same ferocity. It does not matter at all which phraseology we employ in our colonizing aims. Colonization can have only one aim, and Palestine Arabs cannot accept that aim. It lies in the very nature of things. In a moment of brutal honesty, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, also expressed the obvious truth, saying, quote, politically, we are the aggressors and they defend themselves. We have come here and stolen their country. Why should they accept that? In fact, Palestinians have long accepted that, and it's high time for Zionists to do as well. And here is a summation of my arguments that I hope to expound in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that opening. We are going to kick it over to Stephen for his opening as well, but want to say in the meantime, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, I'm your host, James Coons. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We have many more debates coming up, and DebateCon 5 this October 5th in Newark, New Jersey. More to come on that, but first, let's kick it over to Stephen for his opening. Thanks for being with us.
Hold on, wait,
Stephen,
real quick. Can you, what is the prompt again for this?
Israel versus Palestine, who is more at fault?
Who's more at fault? Just that. Okay. I'll be short and sweet here. When we look at the modern conflict and we see who's at fault, I feel like the opposing opening statement, I think, works just fine for my opening statement. I think that a lot of Arabs and Palestinians especially consider that Israel was conceived of and born in sin, and therefore it has been the policy both de facto and de jure, whether we're talking about the actual rejection of things like the Partition Plan in 47, we're talking about the 3 no's that the Arab League all issued at the Khartoum Conference in 67 after the Six-Day Wars, or after we're talking about explicit rejection of peace talks in 2000 at Camp David, Taba Summit, or 2008, between Abu Mazen and Olmert. There is just no type of Israeli state that can ever exist in the Levant. I think that every single argument that my interlocutor gave, and will expand upon here, leads us to only one conclusion, which is we either have to destroy Israel as a state that protects the ethnic Jewish character of the state, or Israelis and Jewish people just need to leave the Middle East, both of which I believe satisfy the idea that Palestinians, or at least this type of Palestinian strain of thought, just cannot have or deal with Israeli people or the country of Israel existing in the Middle East. So I feel like the biggest driver to, or one of the, I would say one of the largest drivers, probably the largest driver to an inability for both sides to seek resolution, is that there is just no Israeli state that the people in the Middle East are willing and ready to accept, at least not the Palestinians or the people that support them and the more radical ideas of them.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening as well, Stephen. We're going to jump into the open dialogue. First, just want to let you know, if you've seen it on the Modern Day Debate homepage on YouTube, tomorrow, Destiny versus Tiger King, Joe Exotic. It's not a joke. It's for real. Don't forget to hit subscribe for that epic debate tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. You don't want to miss it. With that, we're going to jump right into the open dialogue.
Yeah, Stephen, thanks so much for that. I think it's interesting that you've said that you have no problem with what I've said in the opening statement, because what I said in my opening statement definitely differs with many of the statements that you've made in the past. For example, you have said that you don't think it's settler colonialism, and that's the entire framework which scholars view the conflict as. So are you now is ceding that point that you're wrong on the issue of settler colonialism is my first question for you.
I don't know what settler colonialism has to do with. I don't know what settler colonialism has to do with the current conflict as we understand it. I mean, historically, you had Jews that lived in the Kingdom of Israel. You had caliphates that expanded across the Middle East. Then you had Jews moving there from the 1880s onwards. You've had, all sorts of people colonizing this particular region. I don't know if I would stop and say, like, just Israel was settler colonialism or the Muslims before were settler colonialism. So I don't know the relevance exactly.
Well, there is definitely relevance because that's the entire framework, but you're also confusing terminology. So you're confusing classical colonialism with settler colonialism, and you're also confusing the word imperialism. These are three different terms. So only the Zionist project is a settler colonial project. Do you
when you say settler colonial, can you
three different
sure
things?
Explain what do you mean by settler colonialism?
So settler colonialism, there's a difference between classic colonialism and settler colonialism. Classic colonialism is where there's a metropole, and the metropole is trying to exert its influence over another region in order to extract and exploit its resources. Okay, that's classical colonialism, like the British Empire. Okay, imperialism is like the Roman Empire. They expand their borders, and those are like the Islamic empires that you're trying to lump in as well. So that's the difference between imperialism and classic colonialism. And then there's settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is in which you have a population that usually almost always breaks away from the metropole and then tries to settle a new territory and replace the population. And that, because of that, inherent in that is ethnic cleansing. So that is the issue of settler colonialism and why it's important to understand. And I can give you some resources for that. There's a book called Settler Colonialism, A Theoretical Overview. There's Patrick Wolf's article, Settler Colonialism and Elimination of the Native. And there's several other books that you can read on this topic as well. But it's important, even if you don't think it's important, but in order to get the framework to understand that that's how this started, and it still is a settler colonial project, that you have settlers, right? You have settlers in the West Bank. So that's still a settler colonial project.
My understanding is there was land that was purchased. So, we can go through each of these individually. When Jewish people bought land from the Ottoman Empire prior to 1917, was that settler colonialism?
Okay, so here we have another thing that you've said in the past. You've said that the majority of the land was purchased by the Jews. You said that in your podcast with Lex Friedman at about the 30-minute mark. You said, I never hear anything about the fact that the majority of the land that was acquired happened by purchases from Jewish organizations of Palestinian Arabs of the Ottoman Empire before the mandatory period in 1920 even started. However, this is completely false.
That is false. That's correct. It's the majority of the land that was purchased prior to that. The majority of the land occupied after 47 would have been nobody lived in it. Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I'm just saying, based on the statement that you said, that statement was false, and that it was Jews only owned 7% of the lands at the point of partition. 1947.
What percentage of the land did the Palestinians own?
So they occupied the majority of the lands.
No. I'm sorry. What is the number?
Mm-hmm. So I don't have that number for you.
Do you think that's curious that you have the 7%, but you don't have the other? Because the implication there is 93%. I think it was 13%.
Well, I have no. That's not true. I have actually seen different numbers for this.
Okay.
And I have even seen people say that it's 70%. Okay, but I don't have that exact number for you. But the point is that you're now obfuscating because this is a complete debate.
Well, I'm not obfuscating.
You're trying to make the point that they didn't steal the land, they didn't occupy the land, they bought the land fair and square. Right?
I never even said, just to be clear for where we are, okay? All I did, right? We don't have to talk at implications. You gave me a definition of settler colonialism. You said that inherent in the idea of settler colonialism is ethnic cleansing. And to some extent, that is probably true. I would imagine if you move to a land where there are people there and you move them off the land, if we consider that to be ethnic cleansing today, common parlance, then sure. But my question,
that's not common parlance. That's a technical term.
Well, it's not like a law. It's
ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing is not. It's not like a legal term. It's not like a.
It is a technical term that scholars use.
some scholars use the term ethnic cleansing. I'm aware after 91, some scholars have taken to using this term, but it's weird to apply that prior to 91 or going back to the
so you're saying that before
1800s, 1900s.
1991, there was no ethnic cleansing that ever happened in history. This is a technical term that historians use, scholars use to talk about the past. So again,
I don't believe good historians use the term ethnic cleansing when they're describing things in the past, but that's neither here nor there.
Is your favorite? No, wait. Is your favorite historian Benny Morris? Is he a scholar that you would rely on?
I'm not saying that my favorite historian is Benny Morris.
He has called it settler colonialism. He has called it ethnic cleansing.
That's great.
Okay.
My question was a very simple question. I just had a simple question of like, we can go back again.
Why are you avoiding the terms that scholars have used for this? The reason why you're retreating from it is
I'm not, just to let you know, right after this round, I'm going to ask the same question because this is pretty insane.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
My only question was, I asked, was land purchased prior to 1917? Would that be considered part of settler colonialism? You answered that question with a quote that I given to Lex Friedman like 12 months ago. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, so yes, you have asked this question before where you asked, is it a big deal that they're just purchasing the land? What's wrong with that, right? That makes sense. Like, what's wrong with me going and purchasing land in China, right? I could do that. But there's a difference between purchasing lands and then saying I'm purchasing land with the plan to A, kick off all the in this case, the non-Jews from the land, and B, most importantly, that eventually I want to establish a state. That was an intention with the Zionists from day one, even before they started this process. Okay, so that is the key differentiator. It's not just purchasing lands, it's about purchasing land with a settler colonial project in mind. And here we have Theodor Herzl, the founding figure of Zionism, who has said this explicitly. He wrote a letter to Cecil Rhodes, who is a British imperialist, and said, hey, why doesn't the British Empire help us in this project? Because it is a colonial adventure. So this is a key difference. Yes, they're purchasing the land. And the Ottomans, by the way, they said, you can come settle in Ottoman Empire, you can buy land, but you just can't focus in Palestine. Yeah, go ahead.
What'd you say, James?
I do want to keep it rolling in terms of the dialogue. Go ahead, Stephen. It sounds like Javad wrapped up just in time.
So Theodor Herzl died in, I think it was like 1907, right? 1908, 1907, around there. So whatever conversation he was talking about in terms of settling Jewish people in the Ottoman Empire, the idea that he would ask the British, can you help us like go and conquer the Ottoman Empire and create a state and carve it out of the Ottoman Empire as we buy land? What was the exact conversation that Herzl, this exchange of letters that he was asking for? Was it to conquer the Ottoman Empire? That's what he was asking the British in 1880 or in 1900 and when?
It was the letter is in, I think, 1902, and he's trying to get the British he's trying to get any big power, and including the British, to help them to establish a state. And the Christian Zionists, by the way, who preceded the Jewish Zionists, did in fact have that plan that they are going to conquer that territory, and they did so. In fact, the Balfour Declaration came 1 year before the British occupation. And the even decision to occupy Palestine was done because of the influence of the British Christian Zionists, who were in conversation with the Jewish Zionists.
That's great. Timelines are a little important here, though, right? Balfour Declaration was a whole, it's like a decade after the death of Herzl. The idea that Herzl is having a conversation with the British, asking them, can you please help us conquer the Ottoman Empire, when the Jews were still pretty hated across Europe and didn't even have a guarantee that there would be a state set up anywhere. It seems like that conversation is being exaggerated a tad. I don't believe that was the nature of those letters exchanged.
But there's an actual letter, and number two is, you're right that anti-Semitism was rife in Europe. But in fact, Zionism started out with if you read Herzl's own writing in his diaries, as well as the Jewish state, as well as he even wrote an article under a pseudonym, he was friends. He said, the anti-Semites will be our best friends. And why is that the case? Because they have the same goal and say that Jews don't belong anywhere in the world, not in Europe. The only place they belong is in Palestine. So the fact that they had anti-Semitic views, Lord Balfour, who did the Balfour Declaration, he actually helped pass the Aliens Exclusion Act, which was specifically about Jews coming from Russia to come to England, and he passed that because he was anti-Semitic, and at the same time he supported Zionism. He was a Christian Zionist.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
these things are not in conflict with each other.
Sure. Jews were definitely trying to find a place to move their people to. I agree.
Not Jews, Zionists, who were a minority of the population. In fact, they were such a minority.
Well, hold on. Zionists were searching for Jews, not because of historic oppression against Zionists, but because of oppression against Jews historically, right? It wasn't just Zionists that wanted to go.
Yes, but Zionists had the belief that early Zionists, including Theodor Herzl, had the anti-Semitic belief that Jews themselves are the reason for anti-Semitism, that they create anti-Semitism by their very presence because they don't belong anywhere other than their own homeland.
Why is that?
That was the belief that they had.
Wait.
Hold
on. Wait.
Just one last point. One last point.
Yeah.
And the reason, and most Jews at that time, they thought this was incredibly anti-Semitic, and they didn't agree with the Zionists, and that's why the first Zionist Congress, they were initially going to meet in Munich, and they had to relocate because both the Reform Jews and the Orthodox Jews protested and said, you can't have this anti-Semitic conference here. And so they had to relocate to Basel. So that is the case of Zionism being a fringe anti-Semitic idea initially.
So Zionism was a fringe idea initially. Obviously, all ideas start off as fringe. Anti-Semitic is a
good point.
Huge stretch.
You can read his own writing.
There's no part in reading his writing where he will say that he's anti-Semitic or say
I will be considered an honorary anti-Semite. This is in his work. He says this. Just look up his complete diaries and type in search anti-Semite.
Why does he say honorary anti-Semite?
Because that's what other Jews are accusing him.
No, I believe he even makes this reference in his book, A Jewish Nation. The reason why he says that is because as Jews create their agencies to move people into the Levant, he's saying that the Christians in Europe will help us because I will be helping them move all of the Jewish people out. And yes, correct. But that's not, wait, stop, hold on. That's not, that's not anti-Semitic. That's him acknowledging pragmatically that as Jews leave Europe and Jews go to the Middle East and go to Palestine, that the Christians in Europe will help us leave because they hate us so much. That's not an anti-Semitic idea.
So read.
I don't need to read. I just told you, and you disagreed with me with what the context of that quote was. That you relied on me not knowing. So it wasn't an anti-Semitic idea.
Read his article, Moshel, which was written in a pseudonym. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's considered a racial slur against Jews. He wrote that. It is full of anti-Jewish tropes. Okay, that is the origin. But anyways, we can move on. You don't have to agree with this. I encourage you to read up on it. But the point is, let's get back to the fact that this is a settler colonial project. Okay, can we agree on that now? We've agreed on that?
So you said that, so if we purchase land because the intent is to create a nation, you would still consider that settler colonialism, yes? This doesn't defeat your argument, so you just agreed with it.
It was a settler colonial project.
Okay,
yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
They had a settler colonial project in mind, and the first stage of that was purchase. Their plan was to purchase enough land, then kick out the Arabs from that land, and once they were strong enough to build an army, and then do the rest. And there are explicit quotes about this.
So I don't understand if the goal was, if it was always to kick out the Arabs, this is a complaint that's often lodged against early Zionists, why is it in 47? Why did they accept a partition plan that would have had 45% of their population being Palestinians?
Okay, this is an argument that you've raised on numerous occasions in different debates, and I'm very shocked that you would make this argument. Because
why would you just waste 15 seconds of your answer saying that? Why not just answer the question?
Well, you waste a lot of time saying a lot of things.
I don't. I'm speaking. I brought up a clear and concise point. I just asked for a response, and we get in 15 different debates, you brought this up. It's okay. You can
do it, Javad.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason that it's a silly argument is, number one, is you base this first on the argument that they even really accepted the UN partition plan. They tactically accepted the the UN partition plan, but they always rejected all of the details of it, other than the fact that it gives them Israeli state from which they can expand. So they didn't accept the borders, and they didn't accept the demography. In fact, we have explicit quotes, not just from, and I've seen what you've discussed with Loner Box, it's not just the 1937 partition plan, but it's also 1947, where they said that they're not going to accept these aspects. And when here I'll give you the explicit quotes. Here's David Ben Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, December 3rd, 1947. Every school child knows that there is no such thing in history as a final arrangement, not with regard to the regime, not with regard to the borders, and not with regard to international agreements. History, like nature, is full of alterations and change. This is from David Ben Gurion's War Diaries, December 3rd, 1947.
Why is he saying that? What's the point of saying something like that?
The point is that he always has in mind that he's going because the other Zionists didn't want to accept the partition plan because they wanted all of historical
Correct. That's right. He has to have these ideas because he has to try to sell. Yes, he has to have these ideas because he has to sell to the Jews there. Hey, we need to accept this partition plan. Listen, I know that you are upset about accepting this now, and it seems like not much. But hey, listen, history is before us. Who knows what will happen in the future? So what you just quoted is an example of them accepting the partition plan. They did. Now, if you want, we could try to roll with a historical counterfactual that, well, maybe in the future they would have broken it, but since the Arabs rejected it outright, we'll never know. So it is the fact that they did indeed accept the partition plan in 47. They did, and the Arabs didn't. Like, they accepted the borders, they accepted the demography.
That is not true. That they accepted. Okay, so here, let's go through the evidence, okay? So this is, by the way, there's an Israeli historian who has written an entire article on this. It's Simha Flappin, myth number 1. Zionists accepted the UN partition and planned for peace. That's chapter 1, okay? Let's go through the evidence. David Ben-Gurion has multiple quotes where he says, quote, "A Jewish state in part of Palestine is not an end, but a beginning. Through this, we increase our power, and every increase." I'm
so sorry, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. I don't know what your major, your concentration is for your PhD. Why do you think it's acceptable to give me one quote as a rejection of the argument that I just gave? I just told you that the Israeli people, they accepted it. Multiple quotes is not an argument, sir. You need to show me that they rejected at the UN. Did they reject the partition plan? Did they accept Resolution 181, or did they reject it? They accepted it. We can go and we can read the UN logs. We can look at them.
So my argument wouldn't allow that because I'm saying that they did accept it deceitfully.
Maybe they did, but they did accept it. They did accept it. They accepted it, right? Then they did accept it.
So remember when you said that in a previous debate, you talked about Yasser Arafat being deceitful about Oslo Accords, right? So there, for you, all of a sudden, his deceit, supposedly, which you were wrong about on that point, but let's say that he was being deceitful and saying something else to Arabs or Muslims somewhere else, that is factually relevant to you. But here
it is. But I would never say they didn't accept the Oslo Accords. They did accept the Oslo Accords. Now he might have been deceitful as he did it, but they accepted it.
Did you hear me? Didn't you hear me say that they tactfully accepted it?
That's fine, but then that doesn't. Sorry. But if they accepted it even tactfully, even if they did it in a sneaky manner, then the Arabs rejected it. That's true. These are true, right?
Chaim Weizmann, the first president in 1937. "We shall expand in the whole of the country in the course of time. This is only an arrangement for the next 25 to 30 years. Moshe Sharet in 1947, September. "We will get hold of as much of Palestine as we think we can hold." Benny Morris talks about how he never, this is talking about the 1937 partition plan. Avi Schleim talks about the 1947 partition plan, that it was just a tactful. And here is the most damning quote for you, is Shlomo Ben Ami, who is the former Israeli foreign minister. He says, quote, his acceptance, Ben-Gurion, of this principle of partition, he explained a week later, was an attempt to gain time until the Jews were strong enough to fight the Arab majority. And in early December 1947, this is a few days after
the Arab majority for what? Because they thought the Arabs were going to launch war against them. Guess what happened after 47 when the Arabs rejected the partition plan? They went to war against them. Yes.
Okay, so this is another mistake that you've made, and this is also another chapter in Simha Flappin's book, where you initially, in one debate early on, and you fixed it later because you realized it was completely false. Okay. You claimed that the Nakba happened because the Arab states invaded. And then Dan Cohen rightfully explained to you, you said literally that what preceded it was the Arab states invading.
Which is not true. What preceded it were the Arab Palestinians attacking the Israelis. Correct. And then the invasion of the Arab states happened in June of 48. Correct. So that is the actual state, yeah.
No. So first of all, let's accept that you made that mistake at that time. Okay, let's accept that. Can you concede that? Because you've said that you don't like how people don't concede things when they should. So
I'm not here to make concessions for statements I've made between 1 and 12 months ago. No. So I'm not here to concede anything I've said in the past.
So it's strange that you think that that 1 year ago, 8 months ago is that big a stretch of a time. But
I've said plenty of incorrect things over the past 7 months, but I'm not here to concede every single one of those things.
I mean, you didn't know where Palestine was on a map in the beginning.
Yeah, and you apparently don't know how to study history. What is your PhD in?
My PhD is in the study of religion at a little
Okay, I can tell because you've said 37 partition plan like 3 times now. 37 wasn't a partition plan. That was the Peel Commission, which is where they for the first time suggested partition. But there was no partition plan accepted or rejected in 37. And you referred to it as a partition plan like 3 times. So I don't know. But anyway, on this point, on this particular point, in 47, after Resolution 181, after the partition plan was accepted by the Jews and rejected by the Arabs attacked the Jews. And by Arabs, I mean the Palestinians. Is that false?
That is That is false too. Let me get
Okay.
to that. But
Go ahead.
before I get to that, let's get to your claim that they accepted a 45% Arab population in their new state.
Okay.
Okay. This is Menachem Usiskin, chairman of the Jewish National Fund. Quote, "We cannot start the Jewish state with half the population being Arab. Such a state cannot survive even half an hour." David Ben-Gurion, quote, "What is conceivable in normal times is possible in revolutionary times. And if at this time the opportunity is missed and what is possible in such great hours is not carried out, the whole world is lost." What is he talking about? He's talking about ethnic cleansing.
No,
David
he's
Ben-Gurion,
not.
December
He's
9th.
literally telling the people. That quote reinforces everything I'm saying. I understand that it's really hard to have a 45% Arab population, but revolutionary times lead to radical measures. We could do this. That's the whole point of what you just quoted.
No, he's not. You're completely false. He's talking about forced relocation. David Ben-Gurion in December 1947, you said that he accepted 45%. He said, quote, "There can be no stable and strong Jewish state so long it has a Jewish majority of only 60%. That's in December 1947. 1 month before Plan Dalit in February 1948.
In December of 47, the Civil War had already started. Of course, the Arabs were already sieging and attacking the Jews at that point. Yes, they had barely just broken through and gotten back to Jerusalem. No, of course he would believe that in December of 47. What do you mean fine? The timelines are important.
So the timeline is definitely important.
Yeah.
Let's get to your next false claim,
Okay.
which is the claim that the Civil War began due to, first of all, you made the point about Arab rejectionism, so let's get rid of that.
Okay.
That's not the case. The Arab states didn't invade. Let's get rid of that.
Do you admit at least that they rejected the partition plan? That 181 was rejected by the Arabs?
Okay, and do you know that you have said in so many other debates that UN General Assembly resolutions are non-binding? How many times have you stated that in other contexts?
Because sometimes they aren't. But that, what does that have to do with anything?
Sometimes they aren't.
Just what I said. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't.
Did you know that oh, really? Why is this one binding and the other one not binding?
I'm not actually sure if this one would have been binding or not. Chapter
It's
6,
not
I think, are
binding.
generally
It's not binding.
Chapter 7 generally are binding, I think. But regardless, I'm just saying that they didn't accept it.
Yeah, they didn't accept it, but they didn't launch a war. They weren't prepared for war.
I know they weren't prepared for war, but they...
Simha Flappin says, and it's backed up by Benny Morris's own quotes, even though Benny Morris will say that the Arabs started it, his own work reveals that they didn't. They weren't prepared for war. What happened was, after the partition plan, there was protests. Some of them broke out into riots, and some of them broke out into attacks, just like the 1936 and 1939 Arab revolt that happened, and prior riots that had happened. It wasn't a war, okay? It was the Irgun and the Lehigh terrorism that contributed to an escalatory procedure which led to the war. And the Haganah was prepared for war. So on the one hand, you have people who are reacting to a decision and rioting, and on the other hand, you have a people who are have been preparing for a race war or an ethnic war. These are not morally equivalent at all. Okay. In fact, Benny Morris has multiple quotes in which he's saying that a few months into it, they're not even sure is there a war. Ilan Pape has mentioned how after a while the Zionists were like, it sucks that this resistance and this discontent has petered out, and the Palestinians are accepting this because we need the context of war. All right? Because Zionists always need pretexts, and that's one thing that you're correct about, that Zionists always do seek pretexts.
Very convenient that the Arabs always give that to them. I don't know why we're conflating and mixing up I don't know why we're mixing up so many timelines. The 36 to 39 revolts have nothing to do with the partition plan that comes in 47. Ben-Gurion making statements in December of 47 would make sense, given that in November the partition plan was rejected and the Civil War broke out. Are we saying that never happened? That there were never groups of Palestinians that were firing on convoys that had cut off the Haganah Israelis from even getting to the city of Jerusalem? Are we saying that all of this never happened? There was no organized fighting going on here? Do you not believe that in 47, at the end of 47, did the Palestinians engaged in organized fighting against the early Israel, I guess, or it wasn't Israel yet? Did they engage in this due to the partition plan, due to the rejection of the partition plan and Israel's acceptance of it? Do you agree with that or do you not agree with that?
So I'm going to read to you a quote.
Do you agree to that or do you not agree with that? You can disagree and then read a quote. I'm just curious. Do you agree or do you not agree with that? Do you agree that the rejection of the partition plan of 181, the rejection of that plan is what led to the Arab Palestinians launching a civil war, a war against the Jews that were in that area?
I already told you that it was not the Palestinians who launched the war.
Who was it?
Okay. It was the Zionists who launched the war. Specifically, it was the Irgun and the Lehigh. The only reason why
the Irgun and the Lehigh were first of all, these are very, very minor segments of the Israeli.
That is not true at all.
Of course it's true. Yes, they are.
That's not true. In fact, you try to discount them, but in fact, there were Israeli prime ministers who come from their ranks.
Yeah,
okay?
like
and
who?
Yeah, the Likud. Oh
Who?
yeah,
Yeah,
like
who?
Shamir,
Yeah.
Menachem Begin.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about?
Yeah, Begin came from the Irgun, right? Do you realize that he sailed on a ship and it was destroyed by the Haganahs? They tried to bring arms in to Israel in 48. It was destroyed because the Haganah hated the Irgun so much that as Menachem Begin was literally on a boat back to shore, he's like, man, I've gotten killed by Nazis, by Polish people, and now by Jewish people too. It's insane. The fact that you're citing a prime minister as though it lends credence to the Irgun, who was a prime minister 30 years after the date, doesn't satisfy or justify any of the arguments you're making.
Let me ask
point.
you.
I just forgive me, guys. It's just that this is a super high level conversation, which is awesome. It's just that if we can draw it back to the big picture for anybody who just tuned in, or even for people who have been listening
there is
the whole
so
time,
to be clear,
like,
there is no there is no big
I mean,
picture. Every single time for some not for some reason, I understand why, the Palestinian myth requires like a misstatement of every single historical fact and then an obscurement with these massive macro modern terms for how to describe like movements. It's apartheid, it's settler colonialism, it's not classical settler colonialism.
Is
It's like
Simha Flappin a pro-Palestinian activist? Or is he an Israeli historian?
if he says that Israelis were engaged in ethnic cleansing for no reason in 47, then yes, that would make him an activist. Yes, if he uses terms like ethnic cleansing or that planned Dalit was a pre-planned action to expunge.
Benny Morris has said it's an ethnic cleansing.
When?
He has. Okay. How? Okay. What are you going to concede anything if I show you that he's calling it an ethnic cleansing?
I would tell you that he's calling it. I'm just
you-
asking at what period, what time period is he referring to an ethnic cleansing? What thing are we talking about right now?
The Nakba. He's talking about the Nakba.
If you go by a modern interpretation, then yes, but the biggest contention of the Nakba isn't that it was an ethnic cleansing, right?
Well, of course that is.
No, the biggest contention is whether or not it was pre-planned. That's the whole point. That's the whole reason why people debate over planned Dalit. It wasn't whether or not it was an ethnic cleansing. Benny Morris will say that it was an ethnic cleansing, but he'll say that it happened as a result of the war that all of the Arab nations started against Israel. The big contention is whether or not they pre-planned it or not, which is what you're using 4 quotes to try to show they did.
No. Okay. Do you want to show me? Okay. Here is another place where you're wrong.
Tell me.
Where you claimed before you. This was in your debate with Eddie Liger. You meanwhile showed one quote, which was a spurious quote, which even Benny Morris has said is spurious. That's the Azam Pasha quote. So you use the Azam Pasha quote that every Zionist propagandist uses, which is the one that you used, and you use that in order to claim that the Arabs wanted to drive the Jews into the sea. So you used one solitary quote to make your claim.
Can you give me like some context? What was this in relation to, or what was it describing?
The Azam Pasha quote?
Yeah, I don't. What is the quote, and what were we arguing?
He was the Secretary General of the Arab League. He was the Secretary General of the Arab League, and you used.
Was this in '67 or?
No, this was before the Nakba. Okay.
Okay.
So you use one solitary quote to make the claim of ethnic cleansing. I'm telling you that Benny Morris himself has written an entire book on it. A book chapter on it. It's called The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem Revisited, chapter number 2, which is in the expanded version. He talks about the idea of transfer in Zionist thinking, in which he says there was a consensus or near consensus amongst Zionists for transfer.
In what year?
From before 1947.
From
all the way up, and then so the only difference between Benny Morris and the other.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, but like you don't know any of the pre-47 history. Like I don't know how to talk to you. When you speak in a broad brush, there are distinct time periods from 1880 up to 1947. And for you to just say, oh well, they believed in transfer for all of these things, conditions changed. The Arab revolts in 36 to 39 changed. The Peel Commission changed things. The Jewish revolts from 40 to 44 changed things. The expiration of the mandatory period in 47 changed things. The Civil War in 47 changed things. The invasion of the other Arab states changed things. You can't just speak with this whole time period in a broad brush. It doesn't make any sense.
The Peel Commission itself.
I want to be sure. Hold on one sec. I do want to jump in just to be sure that it's awesome. You guys have passion. I do want to be sure that each of you has your own time where you're not interrupted by the other. So I do want to, without going into time sections, just remind you that if one is speaking, if you can hold off until they're done, and I trust that neither of you will dominate the time because both of you are so experienced.
Okay, so as far as the idea of forced transfer, there are scholars who have written about, like Nur Masallah has a whole book on this. Israel Shahak has a book chapter on this. Benny Morris has a book chapter on this. They've talked about the idea of transfer from the beginning of Zionism all the way to the Nakba. And so what they have said is it became a consensus, okay, by the 1930s and 40s is what Benny Morris writes, to
by
even
after
the PLO
39,
plan,
after the Arab
even-
revolts from
no,
36 to
that's-
39, it started to become a
Let's just-
consensus more.
just to be-
that,
let's give.
I'm telling you what
Javad
Benny
maybe 30
Morris
more
has written.
seconds.
Benny Morris doesn't
Okay,
believe that 47 was
Javad.
an ethnic cleansing. I don't know why you keep saying
He,
that.
are you serious? I just showed you the quote.
What was the quote?
Okay, so why don't you start? I'll get the quote ready, and you can get your next point, and then I'll give you the quote.
We can't speak broadly from the 30s to the 40s. My understanding
What
is...
I'm telling you is that it was a consistent viewpoint throughout that
That's
entire
great.
period.
I don't believe that it was. I think that even through things like the Haran massacre in 1920, even through things right up, I think, until the Arab revolts in 36, right up to that point, I think there was still some idea that it might be possible for the two people to live together. That's why the Peel Commission, that was the commission that was conducted in 36, I think presented in 37, was such a big deal. It was the first time when people were like, oh shit, maybe this isn't working. Okay? And then they kind of went back and forth, and both sides were like, oh, probably not going to work. And then in 47, there was the big, okay, we're going to partition, largely along what was discussed in the Peel Commission. The Jews accepted, which is strange, given they want to expel all these Arabs, they would accept 45% of them, okay, being on the new country that they're going to accept. And then the Arabs rejected. And then the Palestinians engaged in war against the Israeli Jewish people there because they wanted to expel them, obviously, of course. And I'm even sympathetic towards wanting to expel them, of course. You feel like they're fucking invaders. Why would you not? And then after they lost, then all of the, what?
You've said you're pro-genocide, so I agree with you. But you meant ethnic cleansing, but not.
Well, listen. If I am pro-genocide and I go to the Middle East and I'm surrounded by a bunch of Arabs, I would be in good company in 48, okay? Because they all wanted to get rid of the Jewish people there, obviously, of course, right?
Okay.
And then in 48, all the rest of the Arab states
that,
went to Israel, and they also tried to fight, and they lost. Yes.
Okay.
Gentlemen.
Okay. So let me just quote Benny Morris now, because you asked for Benny Morris. So he's saying by the 1920s and 30s, quote, this is from the book Birth on page 59. A consensus or near consensus formed amongst the Zionist leaders around the idea of transfer. All understood that there was no way of carving up Palestine which would not leave in the Jewish designated area a large Arab minority or an Arab majority, and that no partition settlement with such a demographic basis could work. Then on page 43, the logic of transfer solution to the Arab problem remained ineluctable. Without some sort of massive displacement of Arabs from the area of the Jewish state to be, there could be no viable Jewish state. And then you're talking about the only difference between him and others is that he refuses to say that it was a plan. He instead says it was a pattern. That's all. And then he says in his reply to Karsh, it's Refabricating 1948. That's the article, because Karsh is one of those guys who's like you, denying the ethnic cleansing. This is what Morris writes to him. Quote, perhaps I erred in not attributing enough weight to the Zionist transfer predisposition in explaining what actually happened in Palestine in 1948. Done. That's it. So he's admitting that there was this consistent, near consensus, and all of a sudden you have that exact same thing happening. You have statements going.
You understand,
all the way
just as a real quick thing, you
Herzl.
understand that transfer is not the same thing as ethnic cleansing, right?
You understand that Benny Morris has said that it's ethnic cleansing and that that's his euphemism.
Hold on,
correct?
no. You understand that, like,
Yes,
for
he
instance,
has.
so wait,
You want me-
would you,
you want me to
would
go
you,
get that
well,
quote
hold
down
on,
for you too?
would you have considered, if they would have accepted Partition 181, is that ethnic cleansing?
What's Partition 181?
If UN General Assembly Resolution 181, which is the official
181
name given to the 1947
Yeah, not
Partition Plan,
Yes.
yes, it was the Partition Plan. Okay,
Right.
if they would have accepted that, would that have been? Would you have considered that ethnic cleansing?
Absolutely not, because the resolution specifically said not to do that. It said to protect the minorities.
It didn't
within your
explicitly
state.
say not to do. Ethnic cleansing doesn't even exist as a term. So why would it explicitly say
They
not to
didn't
do
use
that?
the word ethnic cleansing.
No, there was no understanding of ethnic cleansing. This is a very modern understanding thing.
They specifically said to protect the minorities within those two states, okay? Which is different than the Peel Plan, in which the Zionists convinced the British to do forced transfer.
No, the Peel. I don't even think there was a Peel Plan. I don't even know what you're referring to. The Peel Commission was when partition was recommended because they didn't get along with each other.
You know, when you call it Partition 181, then you're okay messing up terms. But when you're saying that I'm using a euphemism, I mean, anyways.
Wait, what was
so
the Peel
point is-
Commission again? I'm sorry, I don't remember. Can you explain it to me?
1937
Wait, can you
Peel
explain what that even
Commission.
was? Yeah.
So that was a plan of giving a Jewish state in a small percentage of the land, about 25%, I believe, or so, and it required the forced transfer either voluntary or forced, of Arab minorities in that region. And so the Zionists are the ones who came up with that idea because, again, that was their consistent
Okay,
viewpoint.
that's not. I don't know what.
Okay,
we're just living in
because
different. So so what was happening was there were multiple white papers. There were multiple white. I don't need a quote. I don't live in quotes. Okay, you're a PhD. You should be doing better than quotes. Okay, the British had discovered the British and the Jews and the Wikipedia would honestly be doing way better right now than whatever the quotes you're reading from. Okay, than cherry picking quotes. Okay, it would be helpful. It would be helpful for you. It would be helpful for you. The British had realized, and all the people who lived there had realized, okay, that it wasn't working. Something wasn't happening, or something wasn't working. So Peel sent people. He sent a commissioner to Palestine, to the mandatory area, to do an analysis and figure out what the fuck is going on. Why isn't this working? So they go there, they do a big analysis, they do a census, they figure out like who's paying taxes, who's built stuff, like why isn't it working? You know what's going on, and then they come back and they present their findings and they say, hey, this is what's going on. Maybe it seems to be the case that because these two people's differences are irreconcilable, they might have to split up. That's it. It wasn't like a huge like a plan to split everybody, and the Zionists were doing it. It was an analysis of what was going on at the area, commissioned by the British, by Peel.
So the things that you're talking about, yes, there was the King-Crane Commission report of 1919, which was looking into what the violence was caused from. There was the 1939 white paper, which these were different evaluations of the area. And of course, they did that in the Peel thing, but the Peel thing was a plan for partition. And the Zionists accepted it. In fact,
but that's not ethnic cleansing.
It's forced transfer.
It wouldn't have been if it's an accepted agreement. That's not forced transfer.
If it's against the wishes of the population, then it's ethnic cleansing.
But it wasn't the British weren't going to do it. It was just a suggestion.
It was absolutely the British who were going to do that. In fact, Ben Gurion said it has to be the British who does that because we don't want to look bad.
Because so why didn't they do it then?
Because the plan was scrapped. There was the Arab revolt.
Yes, and the Arab revolts, by the way, were a huge reason why the Palestinians lost so badly in '47. They crushed the Arabs there. But if they wanted to implement
the colonial power crushed the indigenous population.
And if they wanted to implement some huge split, some huge like establishing of a Jewish state, why wouldn't they have just done it in '39 after they chased out like basically all the Arab leadership and crushed the middle place? The British were never going to implement the Peel Commission, right? That was just the analysis they did.
There were different factions amongst the British. There were some that were Zionists, and there were some that had more pro-Arab viewpoints. So what happened was in the Peel Commission, it was a Zionist-facing plan, and then things changed, especially with the war, war and all this kind of stuff. Things changed, yes. So the different plans differ. So the 1939 white paper, for example. Guess who liked that better than? So the Arabs liked that better, right? And how did the Zionists respond to that? Do you know? They initiated waves of terrorism. Okay, and the waves of
why did they initiate waves of terrorism?
Against the British.
Yeah, why?
Because the British were backing off from partition and said the majority of the population does not want partition, that it's not feasible, and therefore we should give this country. We should eventually move towards a democracy, and that's what we should move toward. For representative government. And that's what the Arabs wanted. That's what the Palestinians wanted.
That's what happened in 1940. The Brits said, we're going to make a representative democracy with the Arabs in Palestine. The first of all its kind in 39. And then the Jews were like, no democracy. We're going to go do terrorism against the Brits. That's what happened?
It's 1939. The white paper. Yes. So I don't know what you're talking about. In fact, in 1920, there was this Syrian Congress in which they created the Arab Kingdom of Syria, which
which lasted for how long? Syria had a revolution and a coup like every 2 years for like 3 decades, bro.
Really?
Yes.
Who crushed it?
I don't know what the Mossad patriots that existed before the state of Israel did.
The French and the British, including the Christian Zionists. And you know who didn't sign on to the constitutional monarchy with equal rights for all religious minorities? The Zionists.
You understand in 1940, the big reason why I don't know where this fantastic story, or maybe I do, I don't know, maybe it came from a friend of yours, but the idea that in 1940, the reason why the Jews were fighting against the British because they were upset that a democracy was going to be created is not true. What they were mad about was, what you don't mention is after the Arab revolts, the British said, hey, in order to like kind of ease tensions in this area, we're going to walk back on our agreement that we made with the Jewish people in the Balfour Declaration. We're going to say, we're going to heavily restrict immigration. And you know what was happening at that same time? And I know how much you guys hate to talk about this, but there was the Holocaust going on. And there were a lot of Jews that were really fucking mad that people were being death camped and they couldn't actually go to Palestine because the Brits had said no more immigration. There are famous stories of certain boats full of Jewish people being turned back. So that's why they were mad. Yes.
And you know what the Zionists did?
They did a whole wave of terrorism from 40 to 44.
Not only that, they prevented immigration of Jews to other countries. They put on pressure for the U.S. and the British not to accept Jewish refugees. Ben Gurion has a famous quote. Ben Gurion has a famous quote where he says that I would rather I save only half of Europe's Jewish children and they come to Palestine rather than all of the Jewish children if they go elsewhere.
You live in quotes. I love your quotes. That is true. When he was having a conversation about how he felt about people fleeing, but that wasn't a policy position, and he certainly didn't encourage people not to accept Jewish refugees. He didn't need to. The entire world hated Jews. It didn't matter.
Lobbied for the immigration restrictions. In fact, they even... There was even a famous case where they bombed a ship, dude.
Oh, like in Baghdad, those Jews. That was all done by the Mossad as well, right? The Baghdad bombings were done by Jews too, right?
Yeah, that was Avish.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, of course it was. Yeah. What else? What other ones do we have here?
You're denying that that's the
There's
case?
No evidence that that's the case, but I know everything you believe. I've done all of these before. All these conspiracies. Yeah.
So is Avi Schleim?
Avi Schleim. I don't know. It depends. I would have to see him write up. Your problem is Avi Schleim is generally a pretty good historian, so I seriously doubt that. I seriously doubt that he's saying whatever it is you're going to claim he's saying.
Okay. How much? Okay. If you're going, I have the book right here. 3 Worlds.
Yeah, I hope you got a sticky note with a quote ready for it.
Oh, I'll find
the USS Liberty. That was intentionally bombed by the Jews, right?
Okay, of course it was bombed. Yes, it
intentionally,
was.
I asked. They knew it was a U.S. ship, but they bombed it, right?
Okay, quote, page 129.
Yes.
That the 5 bombs
ready to
played
go.
some part in persuading the Jews of Iraq to immigrate to Israel is beyond dispute. The big question is who planted the bombs. The evidence I have unearthed provides a partial answer to this question. 3 of the 5 bombs were the work of the Zionist underground in Baghdad.
Wow.
Avi Schleim.
Backed by, there it is.
Mind quoting, right? Oh, I'm sorry I use books instead of Wikipedia.
Yeah? You should try doing it on Kindle next time instead of having your little notes in the books. You understand that the quote that you gave didn't actually support the argument that the state of Israel was engaged in terrorist attacks in other countries in order to try to force the
Zionist underground.
First of all, even that claim is contentious, which Avi Schleim is saying right there, right? This is already a contentious claim based on new information that he's unearthed.
I'm not saying that it's
number 1.
100%.
Okay,
I'm
number
saying
2.
that it's very likely.
Okay, well, it seemed you implied that it was 100%, but
okay, I'm sorry that you think that, Stephen. All right, so let's go through the list of things that you've gotten wrong so far.
We don't even agree on the history.
Benny Morris, settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing. I gave you the quote by Benny Morris on that.
You did.
Did I, or do you need it still?
What was the quote again? What page? I'm sorry. Just give me the...
Okay, so hold on. Let me get that for you. And the reason... It's hard to find the exact quote when you need it, but it's definitely
the fact that he wrote in 2016 an article for Haaretz saying Israel conducted no ethnic cleansing in 1948.
Yes,
Does that cut against your article? Okay, but he changed his mind, I guess.
He changed his mind because he became a propagandist.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so in 2014 Haaretz interview, they perpetrated ethnic cleansing. There are circumstances in history that justify ethnic cleansing. I know that this term is completely negative in the discourse of the 21st century. He's not saying don't use the term for past events like you do. And then he says, but when the choice is between ethnic cleansing and genocide, the annihilation of your people, I prefer ethnic cleansing. And that was the situation in 1948. That was the situation. That is what Zionism faced. A Jewish state would not have come into being without the uprooting of 700,000 Palestinians. Therefore, it was necessary to uproot them. There was no choice but to expel the population.
Why was it necessary to uproot them?
The villages.
Why was it necessary to uproot them?
Because Zionism has the belief that you need a super majority of Jews, which is at least 80%. And so because they believe that non-Jews...
It wasn't because there was a civil war going on?
The civil war came after the Zionists decided to initiate the war, correct?
It didn't. No, it started. It started with the Civil War. It started with the Arabs fighting the Israelis after the rejection of 181.
I already showed you that, as Simha Flappen has shown in quite detail, and Benny Morris's book will also prove this, is that Lehi and Stern Gang were the ones who, through an escalatory process, started the war. Because they kept bombing Arab villages and
in response to Arabs attacking Jews.
No,
as they had been in the prior 2 decades.
They attacked So the Haganah had the policy of restraint for a couple of months, in which they only did defensive retaliation. Now, their version of defense was if an Arab village, even one person attacked from that, will attack the entire village. That's their defensive, and that's Israel's policy now forever. But the Stern Gang and the Lehi said, no, we're not going to restrict it to that. We're going to do a preemptive attack against Arab villages. So you're wrong on this.
The Lehi and the Irgun might have engaged in preemptive warfare, but one, they were doing it in response to decades of Arab violence prior to that. It didn't come out of nowhere, number one. And number two, those two groups were very small groups that were rejected by the Haganah.
The Haganah and the Irgun and Lehi worked together at various times in history, including during the war we're talking about, the War of Independence. All of them were folded into the IDF.
They were folded into it because they were disbanded. Yes, they were folded into the IDF because they were radical, because they were hard to control.
Integrated into the IDF.
They weren't just integrated. This is why when you brought up, that's great. That's fine. And
the Stern Gang, the leader, there's streets in Israel named after him.
Go ahead, Stephen.
You understand that, like, the event that I'm referencing, when Begin was coming in on a ship with weapons for the Irgun, that the Haganah fired on that ship and destroyed it and stole those weapons and didn't allow the Irgun to have those weapons, right?
The reason is because the Haganah feared that if there was violence against the British, and especially while the British were still there, the British would retract their support, and that would create a problem. So
Wait, that the British would retract their support when?
So they were the mandatory power. So if they upset the British wouldn't allow there to be partition. So they knew that they can't. That's why they waited for the British to leave before they really, escalated their warfare.
No. They waited for the British to leave because that's when the mandatory period expired, and then they voted on what the country should look like afterwards.
You yourself have already said the Civil War already started before that period, correct?
No, the Civil War started right after the Arabs rejected the Partition Plan.
Exactly.
In 47.
The mandatory period ended.
As the British were already leaving. That was the point of the Partition Plan, is what would it look like afterwards.
So now, do you see how you're like changing everything that you say? What I'm trying to tell you is that they didn't want to piss off the British during certain periods of time, and that's when they said to exhibit restraint.
No, you've already passed from 40 to 44. The King David Hotel bombing, all this shit had already happened. The Jews didn't give a fuck about the Brits by 47. Like, the shit was fucked. That's why the Brits, part of why they wanted to just leave and get out. From 40 to 44, the Jews had already engaged in like terrorist attacks and everything against the Brits that were there.
Yes, the Irgun and Lehi, and at various times the Haganah, but it depends on the situation. So when the Haganah thought it was strategic, they did it. Otherwise, they opposed it, and sometimes the Haganah showed some restraint. So this is like you always say, be complex and nuanced. This is what I'm asking you to be right now. Okay, so I think we should move on because we've already gone to the point of you're claiming. Okay, the other thing, the only other point that I think we should get to is the idea that the Arab states. Yeah, go ahead.
Just if you're able to turn your mic up just a smidge, Javad, just to be sure that we. Someone in chat was saying, and I just want to be sure they can hear you as clearly as possible.
I don't know how to. Does that do the trick right there?
Not a problem. Frankly, I think it's good. Go ahead.
Okay. You have said that that the Arab states intended to ethnically cleanse the Jews, correct?
I don't like the term ethnic cleansing is stupid.
Did they plan on massacring the Jews or kicking them out?
In 48, yes. 47, 48, yes.
When they attacked?
In 47, 48?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
When the Arab states were involved. Okay. So, first of all,
it's hold on. I have. Because now I'm not sure we're going. So here's what I would say. The public rhetoric, and I think the citizens of these countries were eger to see that happen, which is, I think, how the Arab states, the surrounding Arab states, because
where's your proof for that?
Because that was the Mufta in. The Mufti in Jerusalem, the leader of the Palestinians at the time, wanted to see the Jewish people expelled. The Mufti, my bad, whatever, the guy that worked with fucking Hitler, okay? And the surrounding Arab states were obviously no fan.
Hitler? The Stern Gang also tried to seek an alliance.
Initially, yes, because they hated the Brits.
And there's a Havara agreement.
I promise we'll kick it right back over to you, Javad. I just want to hear the rest from Stephen.
The rhetoric from the surrounding Arab states was obviously that they needed to defend the Palestinians, especially because the Nakba, but the term partially originally coined because of the idea that the Arabs had failed to defend their population from being expelled by the Israelis. When they came in and fought, they there was ostensibly this idea of kicking them out, but I think that each individual nation was probably a little bit more concerned with their own borders and their own kind of like territorial conquest than actually committing to a hard expulsion of Jews. One, because they didn't have the military might or organization to do it, and two, because it was safer and easier to just conquer some territory and chill. I think that's probably why Egypt stopped in the Gaza Strip. It's probably why Jordan stopped after they had the West Bank, and it's probably why Syria stopped when they conquered a little bit in the north. Maybe they could have pushed further, but I don't know like how super committed to it, because Pan-Arabism after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire was always kind of like a myth and a dream, as we saw over the intervening decades where nothing really happened, even though they kind of say it. So that's my nuanced answer if you want it, but we'll go for where you over there. Yeah,
I appreciate it. So, okay. So in the past, you have said, and I think it's important. I'm not trying to I'm glad that if you're shifting your opinion, that's great. But the reason why I think it's important is because it's a standard Zionist talking point, and it's a powerful talking point, which is the idea that the Arab states wanted to invade and ethnically cleanse or massacre the Jews. That's still that's what the majority of Zionists think, right? So let's go through that one by one. Let's see what the evidence shows. Number one, the Arab states were reluctant to attack. They were compelled into war by the angry public, who was reacting to what? Reacting to the Nakba. There were all these Palestinian refugees.
They were reacting to the Palestinians losing in 47, yes, and 48, yes.
They were not them losing. They were reacting to them fleeing their homes in terror from the massacres.
Because they lost their civil
because
war.
They were
yes.
being massacred. No, they were being massacred. You don't have to be so Hutus and Tutsis, right? I know that you're a pro-ethnic cleansing guy, but normal people, when they see people getting ethnically cleansed, don't think that's something that you go, yeah, that's cool that they lost. Okay, but anyways, here's what General John Glubb said, and this is quoted in Morris's book, 1948, page 181. The Arab statesmen did not intend war, he writes, and they knew that they were heavily outmatched by the Zionist entity. They only very reluctantly and lethargically mobilized for war because, quote, none could ignore the Palestinian Arab tales of massacre and exodus. Morris, page 182 of 1948. The stated objective for the war, what was it? It wasn't what you claimed in many debates before, that it was to ethnically cleanse. It was to save the Palestinians from the massacres that were taking place. Quote, Morris, 1948.
Wait. You think that, hold on, so you think that in 48, you think the surrounding Arab states would have just wanted to fight to what? The partition borders in 181?
So let me tell you exactly what they were trying to fight for. They were trying, and this happens in multiple times in history.
Are you just going to say to save the Palestinians without actually?
Well, can I finish? Is that okay? So number one is, yes, they were forced by the public to at least publicly say that's why we're going to, and reluctantly they went to war. And number two is they were desperately hoping for international intervention to stop the war. That's why they went to war. Okay, and they hoped that if they showed enough strong force initially, the international body would get involved, America would get involved. In fact, America did get involved. The Americans got involved and the British got involved. There was an British proposal, there was an American proposal that both proposals the Zionists rejected. Okay.
There was already a proposal. It was called Resolution 181. The Arabs rejected it. Kind of hard to go back to that after you reject it, start a civil war, and lose.
So I already told you that the Zionists also rejected every
They didn't, though. They
part
accepted it. You're saying they sneakily rejected it. They didn't. They accepted it in whole.
No, they didn't. They falsely accepted it. Okay, so when you accept the resolution, is it okay if there's a resolution that you can't have a nuclear weapon, is it okay to say, yes, I accept that, and then go and make a nuclear weapon? Would that be acceptable to you?
Asking me if it's okay to do it is different than asking if it was accepted.
If a country said, if Iraq, let's say there was a resolution passed against Iraq that you can't have nuclear weapons, and then I said, Saddam Hussein, he accepted the resolution, and then he goes to his cabinet the very next day and says, I didn't really accept this, we're going to make a nuclear bomb, and then he makes a nuclear bomb. Would you then use that as a talking point that, see, he didn't want to, he said that he's not going to have a nuclear bomb? What's the point of that?
The point is that I would say, the point is that...
It makes it worse.
No, yes, it does make it worse. The point is that now you can go with all of the condemnation of you violating and agreed upon, whether it's a chapter 6 or 7 UN resolution, you agreed to this resolution, you violated it. These are causes for war. These are causes bellis. Yeah, you can do these depending on the type of resolution. Yeah, of course.
First of all, it's a non-binding resolution.
It doesn't matter if it's non-binding. You can still use it. It doesn't matter. You can still use it.
Americans said, let's go to the propose that we should go to the UN Security Council and resolve this situation, and that's what the Arabs and the Palestinians wanted. And so it was only the Zionists who refused to do that.
The Arabs and the Palestinians wanted it. They already shot down the UN resolving things in 47.
So you focus on one thing that they disagreed with, whereas you reject all of the, or you ignore all of the other proposals that the Zionists disagreed with. Why do you focus on that? Because it's
ignore which ones? What are we talking about?
should we go through the list of peace proposals that the Zionists have disagreed with?
After
and
48,
rejected?
what's the first one?
Before we can, okay.
There
we
was
can
the
start
Lausanne Peace
from-
Conference in 52, where the Israelis accepted that they would have taken on 200,000 Arabs in the Gaza Strip. That was rejected
you
because
got
the Arabs
both?
didn't want to
You
leave
got-
any land. Yeah, what do you?
You got the year wrong, and you also got the number wrong of refugees.
Sorry, was
So
it 51
you're wrong
instead
on-
of 52?
No. So first of all, it was not 200,000 refugees that they accepted. In fact, they rejected the American proposal, which was around that. And Truman sent a letter to the Zionist leaders and said to Israel and said that.
Wait, what are we talking? I don't know what
intransigence
what are we
on this-
talking about right
Talking
now?
about Lausanne Conference.
Okay.
Okay, 1949. Okay.
Okay, my bad.
So, yes, and so you in the past have again because you always blame the Arabs because the reason why you blame the Arabs is because it's a Zionist talking point that the Arabs miss. Abba Ibn said that the Arabs don't miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, so you parrot that point. But actually, what real scholarship has shown is that it's actually Israeli intransigence. There has not, in fact, actually, this is a really good book that I know that we don't like books, especially physical books, but Ze'ev Maoz is a great book that you should read. It's another Israeli scholar, by the way. He was the former academic director of the master's program at the Israeli Defense Forces National Defense College. His entire book is about how it's Israeli policy not to propose peace and to be very reluctant to accept peace. It's part of the Israeli strategy. And so we can go down the list.
For what years? Why
I want
So
to.
let's go. Okay.
I do want to give fair time to the whole timeline. At the same time, I do also want to focus on the more recent events in Israel-Palestine.
Can we? Okay, so can we move? How about this? Let's move on from 1948. We're not going to agree on that. So let's move on to the peace. Let's go to the next chunk of this debate, which is who's been actually intransigent: the Arabs and the Palestinians, as you have said, and the Zionists say, or the Israeli side. So let's go through that. So let's go through all of the peace offers that Israel and the Zionists have rejected. Okay. So
we disagree on every single thing you brought up so far. Are you just going to name a bunch of things and say this is where Israel? Like you understand, I'm probably going to disagree with your characterization of literally every single thing, right?
You could contest it. You could contest.
Well,
it.
like even in
That's part
Lausanne,
of it.
so you're saying that are you saying the Jews didn't consider like accepting that they were going to take back the Gaza Strip from Egypt and they were going to accept some 200,000 refugees?
I mean, they definitely. You brought this up in a previous debate, and the guy laughed when you said, "Of course, they accepted that they wanted to take a Gaza Strip." Like, why would that be something that you're going to use as an argument? They wanted the Gaza Strip and they wanted the West Bank. So, why would that be a thing for you? But
I don't think. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So by the way, the Israeli new historians, they have written not only about 1948, but they've also written about the post-1948 period in which they combat the old historian myth that it's Arab intransigence that led to a failure to convert the armistice agreements into formal peace treaties. In fact, the new historians have shown that it was Israeli intransigence. David Ben-Gurion said that he doesn't need anything more than these armistice treaties, whereas Egypt sought a formal peace. Syria sought a formal peace. Jordan sought a formal peace. And it was in all three cases, it was Israel who rejected this. So when you're trying to lay the blame, that's what you're trying to do with the Lausanne Peace Conference, is to say, look at these Arabs, they just don't want peace, right? That's what you're trying to prove, correct?
I don't know how to. You're historically illiterate, so I don't know how to even begin to breach the conversation.
yeah.
You're
really
bringing up
wouldn't say
Lausanne that
you
happened in
didn't know where
49, and you're gonna
Palestine
give
is on the map.
Sadat as an example of guy that pursued peace. That was in like 1970 was the first offer. If
Who's
you want to make an
talking
even,
about Sadat?
if you want to make a,
You're just. It's.
I'm sorry. Hold on. Wait. I'm sorry. Wait. Did Nasser? Hold on. Wait. Did Nasser offer Israel peace? Is that who we were talking about?
Yes, he did.
When was this?
He did.
When?
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, educate me, please. Tell me.
So
Yes.
Let's educate you.
Okay,
Let's
yeah.
educate you. Okay. Let's go through the timeline
Yeah.
now. Okay.
Go ahead.
And you can contest, obviously. Okay.
I'm sure I won't. Go ahead.
Let's start from 1919 and 1920. There was the Faisal-Weizmann Agreement, and then there was the Arab Kingdom of Syria, where which was a constitutional monarch. Wait, hold on. Let me just.
Israel didn't exist in 1919 or 1920. So rather than go through the paste bin of like pro-Palestinian, like anti-Semitic fucking links you have, let's start at 48 and go forward.
Just give me 30 seconds on the pre.
No, go. Tell me when did Nasser offer peace to Israel?
I do want to.
Okay, hold on. Before Nasser, you know that Nasser wasn't in the leadership role after 1948, right? You do know that, correct?
I don't know when he came into leadership, the
Okay,
year that he came into leadership, but tell me when you just said that he offered peace to Israel.
Let's talk about historical illiteracy, please. Okay, so
what is it?
about.
Then tell me when Nasser offered peace to Israel.
Okay,
Before we-
1948, American
we-
proposal to mediate and endorse trusteeship until a peaceful resolution could be reached, opposed by the Zionists. Morris, page 114 to 115 in the book 1948. 1948.
Wait, what is
Haganah
it? What are you
refused
talking
ceasefires
about?
to-
What
Hold on,
piece?
give me 2 minutes.
let's-
I can't
minute.
believe this is what a
Javad, if you're
PhD
able
from
to-
Harvard.
Okay,
This is
look,
insane to
wait,
me. How is this
look,
possible?
King-
Hold on
King
one
Farouk
second.
of
Javad,
Egypt,
if you're able to give like a
1948,
pithy
not
explanation of
Nasser.
where you're going.
Okay.
Are you
so
able to
where
give
I'm
us
go-
like a summary, like a
100%.
paraphrase of
What
where
I'm
you're
trying
going?
to say is, historically, there were 50 plus instances of Arabs and Palestinians offering peace to or outside groups as well, Soviets, the Americans, the French, offering peace, and it's Israelis who refuse. And the reason they refuse is because they cannot accept a Palestinian state. That is my argument. So it's very germane because Destiny claims that it's Arab intransigence, because that's a standard talking point. What I'm trying to tell you is, can you name a single Israeli prime minister who accepted a sovereign Palestinian state?
A single Israeli prime minister who accepted a
Yes.
sovereign Palestinian state.
Yes, please.
I would argue that in 47, I would argue Ben Gurion did, but with his acceptance of the partition plan. I believe that, I think it's publicly stated, I think in 2013, Netanyahu was probably willing to accept something, although it didn't happen. I know that
who did you say?
Olmert, I know
Wait,
that
who did you say?
Olmert,
You said
let me,
Netanyahu?
if you want to
Sorry.
run off list, we can do it. You can look up
No, I'm not-
2013
I'm not asking
Netanyahu
you to
Palestinian
repeat.
state if you want to find, if you want to find this, you can, okay?
Okay, Netanyahu, okay, perfect.
Yes, that's fine.
let's-
If you're going to
let's-
go ahead and quote at me, the Likud party platform, I'm also aware of that. Yes, Netanyahu is not
Okay.
the far-right conservative
Okay.
leader of things. He's just a person that holds coalitions
Okay,
together.
go
And he's
ahead,
a spineless
go ahead,
fuck.
go
Okay?
ahead. No,
Pretty
go
sure
ahead,
in
go ahead.
2008, yes, Olmert went back and forth with Abu
Olmert did
Mazen,
not
and
accept
he
it.
and he would have probably accepted one.
sorry.
I believe
Let me-
in
let me let you
in
finish.
2000 after the Camp David talks and after Taba, I'm pretty sure that there would have been an acceptance of a Palestinian state there. You could argue that the Oslo Accords were kind of an acceptance of a path to a Palestinian state. I mean, what do you want? What more?
Okay.
Can you give me here's a question.
All right.
Can you give me an example
100%.
where the Palestinians have accepted the existence of an Israeli state with defined borders?
Yes. Yes.
Please don't just say that it's when Arafat recognized
Hold on,
Israel.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
First, can I? Okay, so now you've given a list. Now let's respond in kind. You first said David Ben Gurion. Okay, so David Ben Gurion, 12 days before the UN met to decide the fate of Palestine, he sent Golda Meir, representing the Jewish Agency. She secretly met with King Abdullah of Jordan and reached a broad understanding with him, effectively splitting Palestine between them. This is in Iron Wall, page 31, Avi Schleim. Okay, so if you're going to say, let's say Germany and Soviet Union, they make a secret pact amongst themselves that they're going to split Poland in half. Do you think then that Germany is going to, you could say that they're accepting the existence of a Polish state? No, you'd say that they plan on invading. So that's
not a plan on invasion.
Days.
What are you talking about?
It is the plan to split the West Bank in half between Israel, Palestine in half.
I would have to
between,
see the details of that letter from Golda Meir. I don't know if it was
Okay,
to
it's
split it
not-
in half or if
it's
it
a
was just an
meeting. It's a
agreement.
meeting.
If it was an
It was
agreement,
them to take the West Bank. It was for them. To take the
there
West
you
Bank.
go. Not split it, but to take it. That's correct.
I already corrected myself right after because
Okay,
it
thank
was
you.
later
All right.
that they went to splitting it. Because then David Ben Gurion, after the war started, then he regretted that decision and said we should actually attack and get the West Bank. And then there was a big debate amongst the Zionists about whether they should do that or not.
Absolutely
was-
not. He would have never.
100%.
No, because they were
100%. I'll give you the-
super
hold on.
aware
Hold
of the demographic issues. There's a reason why the fighting stopped where it did. No, absolutely not.
but
They would have
were-
never invaded to
they-
take these things.
They were ethnically cleansing, right?
Not for no
that's
reason,
why.
no. There was a war.
But you're actually not 100% incorrect. It is because of demographic reasons that they decided not to do it, as well as, more importantly, because of the British. Okay, because the British were still involved with Jordan. Okay, but okay, let's go through the record now. You named David Ben Gurion, so I already told you that 12 days before, that's what he said. David Ben Gurion in 1956.
That didn't even make sense. What would the British being involved with Jordan have to do
Hold on.
with Israel conquering the West Bank?
Because if they're conquering the West Bank, there can't be a Palestinian state, right?
No, there wasn't a Palestinian state. Nobody even thought about this or cared
the
about this at that point in
partition
time.
plan- So the entire argument of Zionists is that the Zionists agreed to the UN partition plan, which said half the land for you, half the land for us,
Yes.
an Israeli and Palestinian state.
Correct.
That's the whole Zionist.
And then the
talking
Arabs
about.
rejected it. Yes.
And what I'm trying to tell you is even before that, 12 days before that, there was a secret plan that they're not going to do that. That they had.
There
made
wasn't
that
a secret
with
plan. There
Jordan.
was a discussion because Abdullah
There was an
and later on
agreement.
his.
There was an agreement. There was an agreement.
No, I don't believe so.
Yes, there was. You're wrong about this.
Okay.
It's an iron wall, page 31.
Oh,
okay,
well, fuck.
Now let's go to
Iron Wall, page 30. Oh, Jesus.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
My
yeah,
bad.
Because a book. But how do you quote a book, right? Okay. David Ben-Gurion in 1956, quote, "The West Bank should be organized in an autonomous area connected with Israel economically while Israel manages its foreign policy and security affairs." So what I'm trying to tell you is that every single Israeli prime minister, when they even have mentioned the state, they actually say less than a state, and they really mean an autonomous region or a Bantustan. So they don't ever want.
When was
an
that
actual
quote? When
Palestinian
was
state.
that? When was that quote?
I'm trying to show now because you're always going to say, "Oh, that was this year, not the other."
No,
year.
I
I'm
just
trying
want you to.
show
I want you to have an understanding of what you're even
It's
saying. 56. That's what you said,
Please,
right?
Please, for somebody who didn't know where Palestine was on a map, have some level of humility.
Yeah. In
Please.
1956,
Please,
what?
you
Yeah.
have. So it's 1956. Okay?
Yeah.
Like.
And what would he have been
have some
talking
humility.
about? What was Ben-Gurion talking about there? Sorry, what was the quote again?
He was talking about his plan
Uh-huh.
for the Middle East. And he had a very expansive plan at that time,
Okay.
not only to, by the way, there was a war that was launched because of this plan. So, anyways, so this was part of that. So part of his plan was that the West Bank should be organized in this way. Okay, so that's
So the West Bank
then
would have had.
Benny
It would have
Morris-
just been.
By the way, Benny Morris, page 354 of 1948, says that Ben Gurion was opposed to a Palestinian state. Okay,
In what?
That's
When?
on that. This is after the formation, so I'm giving you before and after.
There is no
Okay,
formation
but I-
of the state. What you're saying in 19. The funny
So
thing
there-
about what you're saying in 1956, about talking about a security arrangement of the West Bank, you realize it was the country of Jordan at that point, right?
So you realize that there's still a discussion going on among Zionists whether they should take over the West Bank, right?
No, because it was
Yes.
Jordan. No.
Yes, there were. Moshe Dayan and Ben Gurion were both itching for war. There's multiple quotes where they're saying that we should launch a war, and then they eventually do launch the war in 1956 based on the plan that I just told you about right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, because
Okay,
56 was
so-
that was the Jordan River crisis, right? Or wait, that was the Suez crisis. Oh, damn. Do you think they
Yeah,
missed?
Suez
Do you think they
crisis.
threw a dart on the map and they accidentally hit Egypt instead of Jordan there? Or
Okay, so do you want to be educated on this?
No,
or are you going to
I'm
keep
good.
talking? So they talked to the British and the French, and Ben Gurion laid out his plan, which involved the annexation of southern Lebanon, getting Jordan involved, toppling the Lebanese governments, and doing what they did in the Suez. And the British and French thought he was crazy when he said
they
this.
did, yeah, and nobody backed them for it. Also, you're talking about Lebanon now,
Yeah.
not Jordan. Nobody was going to support them on that. They knew it, and they couldn't handle the demographic takeover of the
Not-
West Bank
you know what
anyways. It
David
wouldn't have
Ben-Gurion
happened.
said? You know what David Ben-Gurion said? He said, "I know this plan sounds fantastic, but Israel can do fantastic things." And then they eventually fulfilled all of those things in that plan. Now they weren't successful in all of them, but they attempted all of them. In 1982, they invaded southern Lebanon based on law. Now I know you're always going to say,
Yeah, I'm gonna say
1982,
30
not in
years
19
later, you're gonna Jesus Christ.
because
Holy
it's part of
shit.
Zionist ideology of a greater Israel.
That's crazy.
That's
I thought
why.
the thing is,
That's
I thought
why.
well, because you're talking
What a
about
greater Israel.
you're talking about Moshe Dayan and Ben Gurion. I thought that they were actually inspired by I think it was Aaron Yeager and Death Note. When did that come out again? And that was what they wanted to do. They thought that they were going to destroy the Marlians and maintain the purity of their Titan bloodline. I thought that's what happened. Or am I mixing up the time? I don't remember when anime started in the Middle East. Like,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I mean, neither do I.
have absolutely
You
no
can't. You
idea.
can't. When you're
Okay,
talking about history,
so-
you can't just jump around like in timelines by decade after decade after. I don't know how you could possibly quote things.
Why can't, I'm literally trying to show to you that every single Israeli prime minister has opposed a sovereign Palestinian state. So I'm going through the record, but you keep interrupting using the obfuscation that is your debate bro strategy.
It's
right?
not a debate
So
bro strategy. You're the debate
okay,
bro right
so-
now. You're giving
so-
me single
okay, so
quotes,
cite-
which, by the
so
way,
s-
I don't even disagree with the premise. Israeli prime ministers have never wanted a Palestinian state because it would stand in the way of them
You just
expanding
said-
Israel.
You just gave a list of okay. Now I want people to rewind where you
Yeah,
said
rewind, yep.
These are where. Sorry, that's old school, but you know what I mean. It gave a list of prime ministers who accepted a Palestinian state. You're the one who said that, right?
Yes.
You said Omer.
They've accepted it.
You said Rabin.
Yes, I
You know
did.
what
Yeah,
Rabin
and Ehud
said?
Barak. Yeah.
You know what Rabin said?
What? I wish
You know what
Gaza
he
would
said?
sink into the
He
ocean.
said-
Which one? Yeah. Which quote do you want to go now? Yeah, I've heard them all. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. You have? Okay. What did he say about a Palestinian state? What did he say about a Palestinian state?
So I don't know. Tell me which one.
He said this to an address to the Knesset in 1995,
Mm-hmm.
exactly when the Oslo Accords were. Quote, "We would like this to be an entity which is less than a state."
Mm-hmm.
They wanted autonomy. That's it, a Bantustan, and which will independently run the lives of the Palestinians under its authority. The borders of the state of Israel during the permanent solution will be beyond the lines which existed before the Six-Day War. We will not return to the June 4th, 1967 lines. We want a united Jerusalem, Jordan Valley, the establishment of block of settlements in Judea and Samaria.
Yes.
You understand what he's saying there?
Yeah.
No Palestinian state.
What he's saying is that
Okay.
they don't want to retreat all of the expanded settlements because they had expanded them a little bit past the Green
They
Line,
are
past
saying-
the armistice lines
so-
of 47, 48. And the biggest thing when repeat, because every time a Jewish prime minister is trying to negotiate, they always have their backs against the wall at home. So they're always trying to shore up their base at home, while they're also trying to do peace talks with Palestinians who are just doing terrorism after terrorism after terrorism. So yes, they will say things in order to.
There's your standard argument against trying to lean into stereotypes about violent Arabs and Muslims.
What is the stereotype? What? I'm sorry. Wait, have Palestinians not engaged in like terrorist activity against the state of Israel since they've like existed?
Really? I'm sorry. Didn't Zionists engage in mass terrorism decade after decade? Weren't they successful in their terrorism, and they got the British to flee the Mandatory Region because of that terrorism?
Yeah. The difference is I don't deny it. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah,
of course they did. Yeah.
Well, I don't.
But I admit mine. But you don't admit. Oh wait. Okay. So then, do you admit that people like Arafat and the PLO literally started as like basically resistance fighter terrorist groups? Yes.
They all resistant. Yes, they were resistance liberation movements, just like
the Jews, just like the Jews in the 40 to 44, right? Thank you. Okay, there you go. Yes, they're all fighting. They've all got their reasons to fight. Yes, true. Thank you.
But when you're trying to portray the Arabs as specifically violent, I'm trying to show you that that's not true.
I'm not saying the Arabs are specifically violent. I'm just fighting against this stupid notion.
Specifically. Okay.
Because only when I'm arguing against people like you who are like the Arabs welcomed the Jews with open arms and kumbayas. It's not true. They was fighting the whole fucking time.
Well, actually, you have said previously that you said this in your debate with Eddie Liger. You said that Arabs violently rejected the Jews from day one when they immigrated. That's what you said.
Yeah, which they have. Yes.
That is completely false. Okay?
What are you considering day one here?
Day one is day one when they land, right?
What, like out of parachutes? Like it's like they're going dropping Tomato Town? What is day one to me? I'm just curious.
Okay.
You don't even have a day one because you don't even know any of the dates. I'm gonna.
Okay. What are you talking about? Do you know when day one started? 1880s.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
So in 1880,
right.
yeah. So Zionist intention from day one was to get that exclusive Jewish state. In fact, so this is now from Morris in 1948, page 3. He has a Zionist letter of 1882 that says, quote, "The ultimate goal is in time to take over the land of Israel. The Jews will yet arise and arms in hand declare that they are the masters of their ancient homeland." In 1882, there are another two Zionists, quote, "We shall take away the country." Morris, 1948, page 3. Okay, so this is what the Arabs the Palestinians were dealing with when they first came. And they knew it. And that's why they responded when they did. But they didn't respond initially. In fact, the Ottoman Empire even said to them, "We welcome Jews to come to the Ottoman Empire, but please don't just move to Palestine, and you can't break away and have your independent state." Okay? In fact, there's even a letter from Ruhi al-Khalidi, who's related to Rashid Khalidi, the Palestinian scholar, who actually said that we welcome the Jews. He says, "The Jews are a great people and we could benefit from their expertise, wealth, schools, and contacts, but they must acquire Ottoman citizenship and should settle in other parts of the empire, not just Palestine." Meanwhile, how did the Zionist settlers, how did they respond to the natives? They responded with contempt. They thought, and this is from Benny Morris, by the way, he says, quote, "Like most European colonists in the Third World, the Zionist settlers saw the locals as devious and untrustworthy, as simple, dirty, and lazy. Some mistreated their Arab workers. They looked down upon these barbarians."
Wait, what is that quote from?
Righteous
Some mistreated their Arab workers for what part?
What do you mean? I'm talking about in the early waves of Zionism, this is how the Zionists treated the indigenous population.
Okay, well, I'm just totally uneducated on that. My understanding was when Jews bought land because of the conquest of Jewish labor, that Jews expelled all of the Arabs from the land they were on. They didn't have Arab people working it. I thought Jews had to work the land that they purchased.
Well, you're exactly wrong, because they did want to do that eventually, but not initially.
Okay.
There weren't enough numbers, so they were working.
Well, the initial, like the first two waves like completely fucking failed, right? Like that one quote that you pulled out of 1880 or whatever, the first two aliyahs basically completely and totally failed.
You always say that's this year, not that year, even though I'm trying to tell you that it's a consistent, near consensus and consensus of Zionist leaders for forced transfer, according to Benny Morris. Okay.
Well, none of the early quotes imply forced transfer. And again, it doesn't even make sense to think that they would imply forced transfer. How could you do forced transfer in the Ottoman Empire? It's their country. It's another country. Did the Jews think they were going to like single-handedly destroy the Arab state? Like what?
The Zionists thought that they could purchase the lands, use different stratagems to kick off the indigenous population off of their lands,
Yes.
and eventually get great power support in order to establish a state. So what's confusing to you?
The idea that they would establish a state or like destroy from within the Ottoman Empire. I don't know what the ultimate machinations were, or what they ultimately wanted to do, or what their aspirations were. And I'm sure also, by the way, that their aspirations were great initially. But the idea that we would take a quote from a person who has aspirations initially and say this is proof, especially from some rando from the fifth Jewish Zionist Congress of the year 1889 or whatever, right? The idea that we would take that, oh my God, look, that's the plan the entire time because this guy said it, bro. A lot of people have had a lot of great plans for everything, but when it comes down to the actual agreements, when it comes down to actually accepting things, this is kind of where the Arabs fuck themselves because they constantly make the worst choices possible. Like for instance, in 47, like in 40, this isn't Zionist propaganda. You already agreed. You already agreed with me. I'm not. It has nothing to do with laying the blame on the victims. Arabs sucked at diplomacy. They sucked at military, and they sucked at having like any kind of cohesive grand vision, and that's why they kept fucking themselves over and then getting fucked over by the Zionists as Israel expanded into the Middle East. Yeah.
Did Native Americans get effed up? They got effed too, right?
Yeah, they did hardcore, of course. What do you think I would deny that?
They did, right? So should we now celebrate that like you are and talk about them in a mocking tone, or should we say that what the European colonists did was wrong?
Who's celebrating them and talking about them in a mocking tone?
You are.
I'm not celebrating it. I'm just trying to get the history right. I'm just trying to get the history correct.
You're trying to. Anyone can review what you just said, and what you said is you're mocking them. You're saying that they effed themselves.
I think they made really dumb decisions. A lot of natives probably made really dumb decisions too when the whole conquistadors came over and they tried to make some agreements. Those are also dumb decisions. But however, I have a lot more sympathy for the natives. I know, thank you. Yes. I'm talking about caliphites, please. Okay, I'm sure that I have a lot more sympathy.
What's a caliphate?
Caliphate. I'm sorry, whatever the term is. Okay, I don't have as much. I don't have as much sympathy for the Arabs of the 1900s as I do for like prehistory, like New World people who had no concept of like diplomacy. They were being invaded by a whole fucking invading alien army with like gunpowder and shit. They had a whole. They got killed. 95% of them died of like fucking smallpox. Okay, these people were on a whole other level of getting fucked over by the invaders. Okay,
there's scholarship on the fact that Native Americans were. That's a talking point of colonialism, that they were wiped. Yes, a big portion of them were wiped off by that, but that's a big talking point and trying to downplay the ethnic cleansing and genocide that happened by the Europeans.
I'm sorry, what? Was it the Minnesiqui Konda was like a secret country here where they had unobtainium and they were crafting weapons against the John Smiths invading? What do you think that the Arabs in the 1900s were more prepared to deal with the Zionist invaders than the natives in the like 1400s, 1500s in the New World? Are you telling me that these people both had the same level of preparedness?
I am telling you that they were all indigenous populations that were occupied by the colonial forces, including much of the Middle East. So what's the confusion here?
Do you think that they're comparable?
Was colonized by Europe. Yes, they're 100%. They're scholarship.
Hold on, wait. You don't think the Ottoman Empire or the prior caliphates? You don't think that those were imperialist entities, or?
Yeah, the Ottoman Empire, right? It's in the name, empire.
Well, empire, not empire.
Yeah, I said empire.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I don't have as much sympathy for an empire. Okay, it was a collapse of empire. The idea that these people are on the same standing. Why would I compare Arabs in the Middle East to Native Americans?
Because they're settler colonialism, like it's analogous situation. So you don't want to compare that, just like you don't want to compare Israel to apartheid South Africa, because you know that makes it crystal clear. And you get invited, you visit a country that's committing genocide, you go on a trip. That's the kind of person you are, that you go on a trip to Israel in the middle of a genocide. 50 years from now, people are going to be watching this debate, and you're going to be like embarrassed to be your grandkids watching this and saying you were like one of those people who was defending apartheid in the 1980s. That's why this is important.
Okay.
All right. So let's move on now.
Yeah, let's do the next one. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's actually go to because you have been unable to name a single Israeli prime minister who accepted a sovereign state, and then you backed off of that claim, right? Because you said that that's not
Rabin doesn't count because of the quote. Ehud Barak won't count because I'm sure you got a quote from him, right?
It's not just a quote. It's scholars who are writing on it, who are using the quote and other information. That's what scholars do. To establish an argument. Okay, and the argument is that they never wanted a full Palestinian state.
Oh, now it's a full Palestinian state, or?
Yeah, a sovereign state, right? That's what sovereign means.
Okay.
Okay.
And then in 47, when they accepted the Palestinian state, that didn't count either.
You said that it's Palestinian intransigence when it comes to
Do you agree? Wait, real quick. Just do we agree that
go
the surrounding Arabs didn't want a Palestinian state either after 48?
So the Arab states were varied on this, and many of them were terrible on this. So Jordan wanted to exploit the situation and expand their territory. So now this is, I guess, a talking point for you, because look how stupid and bad the Arabs are, right? But I'm going to agree with the factual record and say the Palestinians, as the indigenous population, did get screwed. Yes.
Okay.
And the Arab dictators have a huge part to play in this.
Cool. You could just say Arab leaders. We know they're dictators.
Yeah, because Arabs are bad. They're terrible. That's the reason.
I never said that.
Okay.
Sometimes dictators can be
No.
based.
No. Okay. All right.
Do you think dictators inherently bad? That's kind of racist, isn't it?
Okay. So you mentioned Khartoum, right?
Mm-hmm.
You did, right? Actually, that's another big talking point of Zionists, where they say
you're going to talk about how the three no's no actually is like yes in Arabic or something, or what are we doing here?
Haha, that's funny, right? So Avi Schleim, quote, "In fact, the conference was a victory for the Arab moderates who argued for trying to obtain the withdrawal of Israel's forces by political rather than military means. Arab spokesmen interpreted the Khartoum declarations to mean no formal peace treaty, but not a rejection of a state of peace, no direct negotiations, but not a refusal to talk through third parties, and no de jure recognition of Israel, but de facto acceptance of its existence as a state," which, by the way, mirrors the exact view of Ben Gurion and Israel towards the armistice agreements. Okay. At Khartoum, Nasser advised and indeed urged King Hussein to explore the possibility of a peaceful settlement with Israel. Quote, "But Israel's leaders feared the new manifestations of Arab moderation and progress towards peace. They therefore deliberately misrepresented the conclusions of the Khartoum summit as the climax of Arab intransigence in order to justify the toughening of their own position." Iron Wall, page 276 to 277. Meanwhile, while you're talking about the three no's of the Palestinians, here are the five no's of the Israelis, even as late as the 1990s. Israel, quote, "clung to the current five no's. No to a Palestinian state. No to a return to the 1967 borders with only minor modifications. No to a discussion of the permanent peace settlement. No to withdrawal from the Jordan Valley. And no to a negotiation with the PLO."
Wasn't that just like the same thing five times?
No, that's not. That's
Okay.
five different things.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, you could say that about the three no's too, right?
Would you?
But things only cut. Yeah, the only things cut one way for you. I know that. Okay.
Wait, hold on. No, the three no's for the Khartoum conference were pretty distinct. One was there could be no formal peace agreement. The two is that they can't negotiate anything, so no economic ties or anything. And then the third was you could never even recognize Israel as a country that you could even do business with. There was nobody
I'm
even
not
to
going
talk
to quibble on you because this is a silly point to quibble on.
Okay, I'm so sorry. My bad.
Yeah, you should
bad.
be. Okay. So Israel refuses to deal with the PLO, right? 1970. Let's go to the 1977 Likud manifesto. You always.
Why do they refuse to deal with the PLO again? We just kind of glanced over that real quick.
Yeah, because they're a resistance organization that uses violence to I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Occupy? Man, do you have to eat while you're debating, man?
They're cookies.
It's kind of. Oh, watch out! You can make Qassam rockets out of cookies. You got to be very careful because Hamas has hired the Cookie Monster. You know that, right? Cookie
I'm
Monster
going to hire the
and
dude tomorrow. I got it. Don't worry.
Qassam rockets.
Yep.
Yeah, but Cookie Monster ate all the rockets, so it's like a big thing.
Okay.
But
what, is the Cookie Monster the Iron Dome here? Or?
the ineffective Iron Dome, yeah. But okay,
Wait, are you one? Do you believe that? You believe the Iron Dome doesn't work? Are you one of those people?
No, I didn't say that it doesn't work, but I'm
okay.
saying that it's not as effective as people imagine it to be. That's what I'm trying to say. And if you want
Because of
scholarship
Postal.
on
Yes, I know. Don't worry. I've read that Finkelstein page.
yeah, because you're the real scholar, and I know Finkelstein is, what is he? He's just a quack.
Compared to Finkelstein,
okay.
I'm the fucking grandmaster of the Harvard Library of History. Absolutely, yes, yeah.
I know. As long as you can find Palestine on a map, right? That's all we.
Well, right now, technically, nobody can find Palestine on a map. Actually, if you really think about it, nobody has ever been able to find Palestine on a map, funnily enough, but yeah.
Okay, let's, yeah, that's funny.
I know.
So let's move on to the peace treaties. Now let's go through that. So 1978 Camp David Accords, right? So the
we
Camp David
were
Accords-
gonna skip over the fact that the PLO started off as like a terrorist resistance group against Israel.
So I was asking you a question. Do you think colonized people have the right to resistance?
Yeah, to some extent.
Can they use violence? Can they use violence?
I mean, it depends on like occupation, depends on the violence, depends on sure, but
No. Can occupied people use violence to resist their occupation?
you understand that is such an unbelievable. That's like asking, do you have a right to kill somebody who's a threat to you? we're going to need a little bit more nuance here, right? Like in general, I would broadly agree with the idea. I would broadly agree with the idea. Yeah. I broadly agree with the idea.
So do you also agree with the fact that the PLO used violence that included but was not limited to terrorist tactics?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Do you also agree with the fact that Israel and the United States rejected the PLO's use of violence in total, not just their terroristic violence?
Yeah, that's not surprising. Yeah.
Okay. Do you also agree to the fact that, meanwhile, they both say that Israel has the right to defend itself against the Palestinians, the occupied people?
Well, the PLO was fighting to take back the West Bank, right?
No, what I'm trying to tell you is, like, even right now in the current situation, you have said, like Zionist Shamsha that you have said that Israel has the right to defend itself when it was attacked on October 7th, correct?
Yeah, but this is a way different situation.
Wait. So you agree with the idea reflexively that the occupying power has the right to violence in its response to the occupied. But meanwhile, you hedge when it comes to the occupied, the colonized, using violence.
In general, you have to clarify the situations. You're trying to speak in very general statements here.
Of course, I'm trying to establish a principle, which is the fact that according to international law, which I know even though you're an omni-liberal, you don't care about international law, which is like the epitome of liberalism. But according to international law, the colonized have a right to resist their occupation by violent means. They
not
can't
against
target
civilians. Yeah,
they
not
can't
against
use
civilians.
terrorism.
Yeah, okay.
I just said that,
Yeah,
right?
you did.
But they do have the right to use violence.
Sure, but I mean, whether or not Gaza would even count as an occupied territory right now is a little contentious. But
we'll get to that. But the colonizer does not have the right to use violence in their occupation.
Because the response to October 7th, I'm pretty sure you have a right to use violence against against Hamas.
We can get to that, but I'm trying to understand the double standard that you have. Okay. So
where did the PLO go? Where did the PLO go?
Wait,
they were in
the third point.
Oh, okay. We're just gonna glance over
the third
that.
point.
Okay, yeah.
You said why did Israel refuse to? I'm getting right to what you said. Why did Israel refuse to deal with the PLO? Okay. You said it's because of their terrorism. That's what you implied.
One of the reasons, yeah.
One of the reasons. So what's the other reason?
Well, there were designs or ideas for I think it was from 67 up to was it 75? There was a time when Jordan finally gave it up, but there was an idea at Israel that some kind of, I think they called it the Jordanian corridor could be created to run the West Bank. And the PLO threatened to undermine both the leadership of Jordan and it threatened to undermine the stability and the security of Israel. So Israel obviously never wanted to negotiate with or recognize the PLO because nobody in that area, neither Jordan nor Israel, wanted the Palestinians to have a separate state because both of them considered it against their interests.
So you were right that the outside states, Israel and Jordan, did not want to grant the Palestinian people their peoplehood and nationhood, which they wanted and which is their right. So
their right is that's contentious, but
that's the actual reason, not the terrorism reason. And the way we know that is because PLO then said, okay, we're willing not to do terrorism and we're willing not to do violence. And then, you know what? So what happened was PLO started becoming pacified. They became accepting nonviolent means. And once they embraced those tactics, did Israel say, oh, that's great. We're happy that you're doing that. Let's talk and make peace. No. You know what they did? They said this is a Palestinian peace offensive. And they said we have to counter this, and this is a huge threat to us. So in 1982, they said, let's destroy the PLO. And that's what they were doing in southern Lebanon. That was the purpose of the 1982 Lebanon War.
How did they get to Lebanon again? Why was the PLO in Lebanon?
Because they got kicked out of their territory, their land, by Israel, and then also, yes, by Jordan as well, which is a collaborator in this. So again, Arabs bad.
Wait, why they get kicked out of Jordan?
Because they were trying to resist occupation.
Because they tried to coup the Jordanian king as well, right?
Right.
Palestinians also assassinated the first Jordanian king. Oh, okay. Everybody has to die who's not giving the Palestinians what they want. Yes, true. Yes. Thanks. Kill them all, yes.
Do you think Hamas leaders should die?
Well, I mean, 2 out of 3 of them are gone now, right?
You think, that's 40,000 Palestinians are dead too. That you think that's nothing.
Supposedly, I mean.
So supposedly, yeah. It's who knows how many people died, right? Who knows how many people died in the Holocaust? Who knows? Let's do all this.
Not one more, not one less. Don't worry, I know that number.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, anyways, let's So now we've established the fact that it's not the Palestinian terrorism, but it's actually the threat of the state of Palestine, right? An independent state. So because if that was the case, then when PLO said that we're not going to use terrorism, we're not going to use violence, we accept Israel, then you would expect them to say, okay, let's talk. Instead, they said, let's invade in 1982. But let's talk.
You understand that you can't. You understand that you can't just do like war after war after war after war, and then right after you lose, be like, but wait, let's try peace, right? You can't do that, right?
Okay, so this is another talking point of yours, where you try to portray the Arab states as waging war after war on Israel, but in fact, again, there's a whole book on this. It's called Defending the Holy Land, in which he shows that virtually all of the Arab-Israeli wars were initiated by Israeli aggression. Okay, and we can go through the record.
The 47 war was initiated by Arabs. And the 48 War of Independence was initiated.
It was done by the Aragon.
You told me
and
that
Lehi.
there was a list. That's fine. I don't know.
It was by the Aragon and Lehi.
Okay.
And the only reason Benny Morris is able to say that it's not because he excludes the Lehi and the Stern gang. He says, oh, they don't represent the mainstream Zionism, so he's able to. But he wouldn't do that with the Palestinian side, right?
And in '67, that was started
by
by Israel, right? Just completely unprovoked.
Yeah,
that was
100%. That was started by. So let's talk about 1956 first. You're jumping. So let's talk about 1956. Who started
I'm jumping.
1956?
Okay. The French, the British, Israel.
No. Oh yeah, it's the French, the British, and Israel, not just Israel. Okay, so fine. I'll agree with you that they colluded with the colonial powers.
Secretly colluded. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
They did secretly collude. What's the confusion here?
There's no confusion. I agree with you. That's like one of the best examples of Israel being fucking sneaky. They were super hungry, desperate for an alliance in the West, so they wanted to do a secret little plan with France and Britain in order to fight with Egypt and have control over the Suez. Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to take territory. That's why they wanted the secret war. And the plan that they came up with was southern Lebanon. They wanted to coup the government in Lebanon. They wanted to coup the government in Egypt, and they wanted to collude with Jordan as well. That was their master plan.
They wanted to do that, yeah, but the surrounding Arab states also wanted to destroy Israel the entire time as well. That's what they're all fighting about. Yes.
So the French and the British said no, and they stuck to just the Suez plan. Okay. So that's the aggression of Israel there. And Israel acted as the aggressor, by the way, for the French and the British. Okay, but before that, by the way, there was the 1949 through 1956 Israel's border wars. You do know that those also were initiated by Israel, correct?
From which years to which years?
1949 to 1956. Do you know what the leading book on this is? I think you should know.
I don't know what the leading book is, but I do know that there were Fedayeen attacks that had basically been...
I say that because your favorite scholar has
Benny
written
Morris?
on this. It's called Border Wars, yes.
Oh, okay.
So he's written on this.
Gotcha.
Okay, and so now you have the specific talking point of the Zionists, which is that it was the Fedayeen who started the war. But in fact, the infiltrations, as Benny Morris himself says, 90% of them were non-military and
yeah, they were people just trying to come back after the Nakba, after 48, yeah. Some of them even got shot and killed by Israeli people that didn't even know they were going to get killed. Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Why? Because Israel had a free fire policy in these border infiltrations. Imagine if America adopted a free fire policy on the southern border. I think you might accept that, but
as long as it's only against brown people, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Does it extend to Mexicans or is it only Arabs and Palestinians?
The really dark-skinned ones, yeah.
Okay, so here's Benny Morris, quote, "Through most of this period, there was an Israeli free fire policy toward infiltrators along the border. Soldiers, policemen, and security guards, especially at night, fired at anything that moved." Sounds familiar? It's what they're doing in Gaza right now, but we'll get to that. Okay, so this is what caused the escalation, whereas Egypt, Jordan, and Syria tried to restrain the Fedayeen, and in fact, they were successful in doing so because they didn't want Israel's escalatory policy. Israel had an escalatory policy because they wanted war, because they wanted to gain territory. So Egypt was successful in constraining the Fedayeen. The attacks went way, way down, and then what happened? There was the Gaza raid, right? So poor Gaza is being attacked all the time. You can go through the list. And that's when Egypt said, you know what, you're destroying us now, you're attacking us. So then they said, we're not going to do anything about these Fedayeen. And that is what gave the pretext for Israel's escalatory policy. So that's the context, and this is in Benny Morris's Border Wars, if you're interested in that.
Okay.
And it's also in Avi Schleim, as well as in Mao's book as well.
So after the Nakba, after all the surrounding Arab states go to war with Israel, after they reluctantly asked, yep, correct. After 48, you're telling me that Egypt, Syria, Jordan, all these states where they were trying their best to keep the people that were trying to return, they were trying to keep them back.
Yeah.
But somehow they just kept crossing into the border to try to get back into Israel, and they tried to restrain the Fedayeen, and it just didn't work. You are right that at some point they did. That was probably in response to Israel's retaliatory attacks. That's why that's why they had that policy of reprisal, because the idea was, well, if anybody comes from your border into our country, we're going to come back really hard on you as a way to discourage you from doing it. That's why Israel's entire like early policy was based upon heavy reprisal. Was the idea of discouraging those countries from hosting those types of attacks.
It was for escalation to lead to war. Okay.
Israel did not want a war. No. Israel didn't want a war on their own. No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
Of course they did.
Okay. Morris, Border Wars, page 411. Quote, a strong expansionist current ran through both Zionist ideology and Israeli society. There was a general feeling shared by such prominent figures as Moshe Dayan and David Ben-Gurion that the territorial gains of the 1948 war had fallen short of the envisioned promised land. This is exactly in that time period that we're talking about 1950s.
In
Border
that
Wars,
time period,
page
what is the year of the...
I know, right after 1948. What comes after the late 40s? It's the 50s, correct?
That's... Yeah.
Yeah, that is, right? Okay.
I gotta do a little ramble. I'm sorry, because I realize you are like uneducating my whole audience. Okay.
Yes, I am
the period from
the
period from 48 to 67.
Qassam rockets out of cookies.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
educating them.
All right. I'll do my mini ramble. Okay. From the period of 48 to 67. Israel was happy to accept basically any land or any country they had whatsoever because it meant some kind of international recognition for their country. Now, you referenced Israel, you referenced this, that they had grander designs. Of course they did. They were oftentimes speaking of the rib cage of Tel Aviv. It was just a dozen or so or whatever kilometers from the West Bank territory to the sea, and that they were worried that they didn't have enough territory, but they were like, it's okay, well, maybe we can get some of the future. Who knows what'll happen? But they were always saying things to assuage the fears and the concerns of Jewish people that felt like they didn't have enough land. So they did have grander designs, but who knows if that would come up or not. They're not sure. But from 48 to 56, there are attacks from surrounding Arab states, but the early Israel is not a super stable country. They have been taking on immigrants from all over the world. Okay, you had one of your first exoduses, one of your first diasporas, because after 48, you've got push-pull factors where Jews are coming from every single Arab country. Okay, now they're fleeing these countries and coming to Israel, and you don't have any formal peace agreements from Israel with any other country as well. The reason why Israel was so motivated in 56 to try to do... No, hold on. You just rambled on so much dog shit history, okay? So thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So in 56, the reason why, you're not quoting those people, you're quoting quotes.
I literally read
okay?
them.
Yes, I hope you did. It doesn't seem like it. Yes, a quote.
I'm quoting them, yes.
I understand.
When you read something, you're quoting them. That's correct.
No, that's not correct. When you've actually read something, you summarize the material and then you present your understanding of the material. A quote is what you do when you've read the Wikipedia of it. Trust me, I know. I'm a Wikipedia expert, okay?
Hold on. Javad, I promise to give you a chance to jump in. Let's just give Stephen maybe another 30 seconds.
Yes. So up through 56, yes, there are Fedayeen. There are some people that are trying to come back. But I think the majority of the people that are trying to come back into Israel are they're basically just Palestinians that were expelled during the Nakba because they want to go back to Israel because they're like, hey, we fucking lived here before. And a lot of them get shot and killed by Israeli soldiers, by the IDF, the newly formed IDF that are there. It's not good. There are also terrorist attacks, though, or there are attacks that are hosted by aggressive Fedayeen from Syria, even from Jordan and from Egypt, of course, because none of these surrounding Arab states are happy at all that Israel is here for understandable reasons. In 56, my understanding is the big driver for the Suez crisis is Israel was hungry and desperate to have a Western ally. That's why they went to Britain and France. They're like, oh my God, we can work on this like clever, kooky, crazy plan and we can all work together because they were looking for security guarantees from the West. You can say that Israel wanted to expand their borders all they wanted, but the Jewish people were smart people, if nothing else, and they knew that there's no way they could just go to war with everybody in the Middle East. The entire world was already pretty pissed off after 48, after the war, after the armistice lines, that everybody's like, hey, you guys are all fucking fighting. What the fuck? Okay, we just got done with World War II. Stop. Okay, and in 56, it was the opportunity to work with two Western countries. From 56 to 67, Israel was terrified. Hold on, no, we won't. No, I will finish right up through. Okay, right up to 73. Okay, in 67, Israel was looking at their literal worst case scenario. Okay, and it was war potentially with every single neighboring state, okay, because of all of the statements by Nasser, all of the lack of security guarantees from the West, okay, and Israel was genuinely scared. And the idea that in 67 they want to start these wars, they want to do this because they know they can hold this territory. When the rest of the world, after 56, it was the United States that said, hey, you guys need to get the fuck out of the Suez. You guys need to leave Egypt. This is crazy, right? Israel did the 67 war not because they wanted to, not because they knew they would win or knew they'd take so much territory. There were multiple messages sent to King Hussein saying to the king of Jordan, saying, hey, stop attacking us from the West Bank. Don't do this. And he ignored it. I believe the quote is the die has been cast. Okay. That's the only reason why Israel was able to take over the entirety of the West Bank. Okay. So no, I reject the idea that up to 67, let me wrap it. Up to 67, Israel was not hungry for war. They were hungry for an excuse for war. Sure, of course, but they desperately needed a security guarantee. The difference is they weren't going to get it unless the Arabs fucked up, which they gladly did over and over and over and over again.
So the point that you miss is that you can try to create a pretext, and even if you can't get the pretext then you generate a fake one, and that's what Israel did, and I'll show it to you right now. So thank you for that.
Which fake pretext are we talking about?
So I'm going to do it right now. So just give me a chance. Now you had your time. Now let me have my time. So what I'm telling you is that after the War of Independence, there were border infiltrations. According to Benny Morris, 90% of them were peaceful, and it was only that when Israel had a free fire policy that they became much more violent and it started ramping up. The surrounding Arab states definitely tried to restrain them, not out of benevolence, but because they, out of a strategic interest of not wanting Israel to retaliate against them. Okay, so then what happened? Quote, Benny Morris, Border Wars, page 418. From some point in 1953, the cycle of infiltration and reprisal boded war, something that certain Israeli leaders from 1954 either actively sought or were not averse to. That is in Border Wars. Then Avi Schleim talks about the free fire policy. And then what happened? There was the Kibya raid that I told you about, and Egypt responded to that. And they were trying to get pretext for Jordan as well, not just Egypt. So here's Avi Schleim. He quotes an Israeli official who says, quote, if Jordanian complicity is a lie, we have to keep on lying. If there are no proofs, we have to fabricate them. That's the point that you miss. And this is from Schleim, Israel and Palestine, pages 87 through 88, where they need a pretext, but they can even generate a fake one or lie about one because they want territory. That's why they do it. They were seeking a second round of war. He's Avi Schleim, Israel and Palestine, page 85. Dayan actively, deliberately, and deviously pushed for war. For nearly 3 years, he was eager for another go at the Arabs. This was 1953. And by the way, David Ben-Gurion was along with this. In 1954, there was a false flag attack on Egypt. Okay, this is in Yagil Levy, who's another Israeli scholar, in his article Structured Bellicosity, page 422. Quote, an Israeli attempt to discourage Britain from withdrawing its military forces from the Suez Canal by activating local agents who would bomb targets in Egypt, thus creating disorder. Okay, so they had that false flag attack. Then the 1956 war. Ben-Gurion expressed regret for not taking more territory, the West Bank and Gaza. Israel had spurned King Farouk's peace feelers, and so too with Gamal Abdel Nasser, who had initiated contact.
Wait, in 54 they did that? What was that?
Hold on.
Wait, what was that about?
Let me just finish. I'm getting to the 1956 war. Okay. Benny Wars on Israel wanting war. This is Border Wars, page 85. Throughout 1949 through 54, Cairo's overriding concern
I'm muting for a second. I think he was just given quotes. I think from the History Speaks guy.
Page 272.
It's crazy, like the things that he doesn't know. It's like
generally
so weird.
Tranquility along its borders with Israel.
He has to be getting like just quotes from somebody. That's my guess.
It was a
but
disastrous, bloody raid that Egypt said, okay, let the Fedayeen do. Why should we protect the Israelis? It was the 1954 Israeli false flag operation. And then the fact is of the Fedayeen raids as a pretext. The Egyptians, and here I'm quoting Avi Schleim, the Egyptian authorities had a clear and consistent policy of curbing private incursions into Israel until February 1955, as I told you. Okay. Benny Morris. All right, so let's move on now. So Israel has this escalatory policy, and then eventually it goes to the tripartite aggression in which it colludes with the colonial powers, and that's what leads to the 1956 war. Okay, after the 1956 war, Israel actually has a decade of peace. No Arab states are attacking Israel at this time, okay? And then what happens? 1967. So you're passing on the Zionist propaganda that Israel was attacked on all sides. That's standard Zionist propaganda. It's called it was a war of no choice, okay? So Avi Schleim, Israel and Palestine, page 106. The draft of the 1967 Israeli Annual Intelligence Evaluation, prepared in May, explicitly stated that there was no chance that war would break out in the coming years. Israel then launched a surprise attack on Egypt to start the war. Here's Yitzhak Rabin, who says, I do not think Nasser wanted a war. He knew it, and we knew it, that he didn't want a war. The 2 divisions he sent to the Sinai would not have been sufficient to launch an offensive war. Menachem Begin, another Israeli prime minister, he conceded many years later that we had a choice. We must be honest with ourselves. We decided to attack him. All right. Aggression against. So they had aggression against Jordan and against Syria. So let's talk about Syria. So in Syria there were demilitarized zones because of the armistice agreements. Who was violating the armistice? The DMZs. It was Israel. Israel would take its military and bulldoze Arab homes, more ethnic cleansing, by the way, house demolitions. And they would try to goad the Syrians to shell them back, to counterattack back. And often the Syrians would try not to do it, but there would be pressure to do it because you're doing this ethnic cleansing. Again, it's a similar pattern that we see in history. So this is what was going on.
Was it
okay?
really from bulldozing homes?
Yeah, bulldozing homes and taking over the territory.
Okay. I thought Diane's quote.
Yeah,
I know the article you're talking about. Pretty sure Diane was saying they were trying to bait him with like farmers and stuff, but maybe they were just ethnically cleansing everybody. Yeah.
No, they're not ethnically cleansing everybody.
Given that we're sneaking up on 2 hours, we should pretty quick here go into the Q&A. We don't have to do it immediately, but I do want to move in there pretty quick because I know you guys got plenty going on. Do you have any final threads that you'd like to draw together for this debate, both sides?
Well, I guess it's unfortunate that we were unable to get through more of the history, but I just want to reinforce 2 points, which is number one, that no Israeli prime minister or administration has ever offered a sovereign Palestinian state because they can't. That's Labor and Likud agree on this, that it cannot be a Palestinian state. You cannot have a two-state solution if one side says that you can't have a Palestinian state. That's just obvious. And the way we know this is we can put the shoe on the other foot. Zionists were offered an autonomous homeland in a unified Arab state multiple times, and they refused, right? They wanted an independent state. So we know.
Where was that
when
again?
we're talking about a state in the mandatory period. Jordan offered it. The Hashemite kingdom offered it.
They were offered what, where, and what year?
What's so funny about this? When you don't know something, you should ask and be educated.
I just asked you. I said, who? What were they offered by? By who and in what year?
Okay, I will give you the exact year here. It was in the mandatory period they were offered. And I'll give you the exact year. Okay, it was 1934. King Abdullah I planned for a united Jewish Arab kingdom, offer of autonomous Jewish homeland in a united Arab state. Zionists rejected this offer. Noam Chomsky,
What's the name of this
triangle, page 35.
Why are we citing Noam Chomsky for?
Noam Chomsky is an expert.
No, he's not.
Yes,
on
he
mandatory
is.
period. No, he's absolutely not.
You know, you are the expert. You are the
compared
expert.
to Noam Chomsky. What?
Yeah, compared to the legend Noam Chomsky, you are the expert.
I'm sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
So in 36, Jordan wanted to move all the Jewish people out. Where were they going to put these people again? What was the plan to put these people?
The plan was to offer an autonomous homeland for Jewish people. And in fact, autonomous regions for minorities was something that the Syrian Arab Kingdom also offered. Not necessarily to the Zionists, but they offered it to their religious minorities. Now, the second point, so that's the first point I want to come up with as like kind of bringing it to the conclusion, is that no Israeli prime minister or administration has offered a Palestinian state, and they are opposed to that. And in fact, John Kerry, in the Kerry Initiative, because we could go down the list of these Madustans that have been offered.
Wait, hold on, wait. Can I ask you a quick question?
Wait, hold on.
No, wait. I'll let you. Wait. Hold on, wait. Look at me. Look at the camera. You were just about to bring up the Kerry Initiative. No, don't look down. What is the Kerry Initiative?
The Kerry Initiative is what is the confusion about the Kerry Initiative? 2013 to 2014.
Okay.
What's the confusion about it?
What was offered?
What was offered was there was negotiations and they were offering a two-state and what did Kerry say in his leaked audio that came out? Do you know?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I'm telling you.
I'm asking you. Yeah. I'm just curious how much you can do without reading down at the whoever prepared this document for you.
I prepared it because I'm an academic. That's what I do.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So what Kerry said in his leaked audio was that the peace process has failed because the Israelis do not want a Palestinian state ever. That is what he said. I could get the exact quote, but you said that I can't look down. So that's best a paraphrase that I can do. Okay. And that sums up the entire peace process. Obama came to the same conclusion, by the way. There was some blame on the Palestinian side, of course, because you always have to blame the occupied people as well. Absolutely. But he said overridingly, it's the fact that the Israelis do not want a Palestinian state. Even Hamas, by the way, has multiple times said that we would be okay with a two-state solution, implicit recognition of Israel, not a formal but de facto acceptance, just like the PLO had said decades ago, and then eventually switched.
And what's the argument for why in 2008? Why did Abbas reject Olmert's offer?
Well, there are multiple reasons. Number one is that it was not a sovereign Palestinian state. Number two is that plan has the Israeli military all over Palestinian land. Why on earth would any Palestinian accept that? Number two is that, again, you're not allowing me to look at my notes, so that's fine.
No, you can look. You're fine. I'm just curious.
No, it's okay. I can do this. Don't worry. The number two thing is that he didn't let them even share. Abbas didn't say no, by the way. Omer has said that was not true. Omer has said, there's a Haaretz article on it, that he didn't say no. He simply said, I need the map so I can show my experts. I'm not a map guy. I need to show my experts and advisors. And what did Omer say? He said, no, you can't share the map. It's
That's
mine.
not true. Omer had set up a meeting with him like the next day, and they
did exactly.
And they skipped out.
That's exactly.
They didn't show up.
No, that's not true.
That is true.
Omer
Omer himself said that. Omer said that they skipped the meeting.
Okay. All right. So let me give you the receipts.
He said that in a conversation with me. I talked to him about that. He literally said that. He said, yeah. Sayeb Erekat, that was the guy that was supposed to look over the maps, and Abu Mazen just canceled the meeting. It was horrible.
Okay.
I can give you a chance to respond, Javad, and then we have to go into the Q&A pretty quick here.
Okay.
Like right after.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Omer initially lies and says he had never heard from Abbas again. Quote, Ab Islam. Omer claimed that he had never heard from Abbas again and that the most generous offer in Israel's history would remain without a Palestinian answer. Ab Islam, page 796. Yet, Omer's version of events is not entirely accurate. Omer and Abbas did negotiate subsequently on more than one occasion, far from ignoring the offer the Palestinians requested clarifications, which they did not receive.
In what year?
I want to say
This was after Omer's proposal in 2008.
Okay. My understanding is that proposal was walked away from, and Abu Mazen didn't really make it.
Propaganda.
Oh, my bad. Has there ever been a proposal? Wait, two questions. Two questions we do Q&A. Number one,
please.
Has there ever been a Palestinian proposal on the table for Israel to accept?
Multiple times.
Name one.
Multiple times. Okay, let's do it. Let's go down the list.
No. Just start it. Give me one. Like around like 2000.
Arab League peace plan, which the PLO endorsed.
Okay, the Arab League peace plan. What did that involve? What was the? How many refugees? How many refugees were supposed to come back?
Okay, you tell me. I know the answer. Do you know the answer?
I believe I do. I believe that in the plan they said that it has to conform, I think, to Resolution 242, and I think that the vagueness of it just says that there has to be a just resolution to the refugee plan, and they don't ever actually call it. You say correct. I'm pretty sure that's language from 242, but okay, yeah.
So experts know that is a implicit recognition that it's probably not going to be a repatriation to Israel.
Oh,
right?
No, that's absolutely not true.
Yeah.
But
so then why didn't Israel ask for the clarification then?
When?
Why didn't they engage with the Arab peace plan, which would have normalized relationship with 57 Arab and Muslim states?
The Arab peace, first of all, wasn't that in like 2002?
So there were two Arab League peace plans, by the way. Okay, one was. Let me get the exact names for you because, oh my God, if I get the name wrong, then you'll.
I don't care if you get the name wrong. I just don't like when you jump around the time list. Yeah.
So there was. Oh yeah, because first you ask for something, then you say you're jumping. First, there was the 1981 Arab League peace plan. This was the first two-state solution peace plan that was put forward, endorsed by the majority of the Arab League members. Israel rejected it, vowing instead to destroy the PLO and launching the deadly Lebanon war. So that's in 1981. That was endorsed. PLO was on board with that plan. That's why the Lebanon war happened in the first place. And then there was
there was no attempted assassination or killing of like an Israeli ambassador or anything. There was no violence from southern Lebanon
Do you know about that? What happened there?
Was it the Mossad that actually killed him?
No, it was not the PLO who killed him.
It was like Abu Shmidal.
Yes, exactly. They said, I forget his exact name. They said something like, oh, it's Abu Shmidal Nidal. Like they don't give a rat's ass who it is because they want to attack Lebanon. So that shows the pretext generation that you're talking about. They said, I don't care if it's the PLO. It's good enough for us and we're going to invade. Because what happened was the PLO was refusing to give them the pretext. Israel kept doing its escalatory activity against Lebanon and Palestinians refrained because they knew what they were trying to do. And so Israel said, what can we do? So Sharon said, let's just use that pretext, even though we know it's not only non-PLO, they're like enemies. Okay, they had like death sentences against them, like from the PLO side. So that's a pretext generation. And then that's the Arab plan that I'm talking about. And then there was a second plan as well, which is much more recent. That
none of these plans have made clear what the Arab right of return. Initiative. Yeah, none of these plans have made clear what the right of return would look like. Like there hasn't been a single commitment to an actual number.
So do you think that number one is, do you think that Palestinians have made dramatic concessions on the right of return, or have they been intransigent on this issue like you have said in the past?
I don't think
on this
they've
issue?
ever made a concession on the right of return. That's my understanding.
Okay, so your understanding is incorrect.
Okay.
And if you had actually watched the debate that you claimed that you watched between Norman Finkelstein and Avish,
I would never waste my time.
Okay, but you said that you watched it, right? But Camp David 2000, demand from the Palestinian side was 10 to 20% of the total Palestinian refugees. Okay, that's in Ben-Ami, Scars of War, page 249.
They
Clinton
didn't,
parameters,
but the Palestinians didn't accept that.
that's from the Palestinian side.
No.
Yes. Scars of War. Okay.
That's
Clinton
just not
parameters.
true. They did not
Arafat-
accept. They
okay.
absolutely didn't. Part of the words of yeah, you're about to bring up the Clinton parameters. Part of the rejection of the Clinton parameters of Tab Summit is literally them saying in the
They did
pages,
not reject-
they literally said, why would we ever accept a plan that gives up any Palestinians'
this
right
is-
to return to Israel?
This is again a myth. They
It's
did
literally
accept
in
Clinton
the.
parameters.
They didn't. They rejected them. We have the papers. You
No,
can
they
read
did
them.
not. You're wrong.
Okay.
They both sides, Israel and Palestine, said yes, but with reservations.
No, that's not true.
Reservations by yes, it is.
No,
The
it's
reservations by Arafat were on the Palestinian side was about a 2-page letter. The one on the Israeli side was about like a 20-page letter. This is and it was now we have access to it. So
We
it's
do.
even
We've read. Yeah, we've read them all. Right.
No, you haven't read anything.
The Israel. We have.
But
We've
wait.
actually read these. You haven't read.
2008
By the way, you haven't read any of these things. If I were to ask you to summarize, what do you think were the rejections on both sides, from the Israeli side and the Palestinian delegation?
I know exactly what they were. Okay, so when it comes for the Palestinians, they did not reject anything. They asked for clarifications. So they said that we need to know. They were talking about land swaps. They said, well, what land swaps? Where are the land swaps? They needed clarifications on Clinton's vague parameters. Again, Clinton, a superpower, just imposing these restrictions, take it or leave it on occupied people, I think seeking clarifications. And not only that, Arafat said, I'm willing to go to you right now and meet you. It wasn't like
After jerking off for 2 weeks. Yeah, that was the point. The Israeli delegation had already accepted the Clinton parameters, essentially. Now, the only parts where they quibbled were that some parts of the Clinton parameters said that this is the percentage of land that would be swapped, and the Israeli delegation was like, well, how could we swap this if we have this? Like, a couple of these things don't seem to work. That is true. I've read these entire things before. Okay? And on the Palestinian side, after Arafat hopped on a jet and he flew all over the world, and everybody has said as much, after the time had expired by, I think, weeks to accept this, he sent a letter back saying, like, oh, well, of course I'll accept these, but obviously I need to know, like, what this or that or that or that means, whatever. He didn't accept anything. In classic Arafat manner, he didn't agree to a single thing. He said he needed clarification on everything, and he was already delayed in his response, and everybody knew that he was never going to accept it. He didn't. He didn't accept anything.
Okay, here's from the letter. Okay, you ready? Yeah. Are you ready for this? I know, quoting the letter that you yourself cited from Israel. Let's see what they said, okay? They said, it states, quote, the permanent territorial arrangements would have to include annexation that exceeds the numerical territorial scope indicated by the president. So number one, we need more land. Okay? How much land? I'm not saying we're going to have more. Wait, hold on.
No, wait. Quote, can you just read? Let's just focus on something quick. Can you read that quote again? Read that quote again and tell me what you think it says.
No, I'm not going to read it.
No. Read the quote. That quote, all you're doing is proving my point to anybody that's literate. Yes, they're saying that based on what's in the Clinton parameters, if you want us to have this thing, it's exceeding the total scope of what you said we're supposed to transfer. It's not possible. These were the only Israeli.
They're saying that they want more land.
No, they're saying that it doesn't work, that the Clinton parameters had a little bit of contradictory stuff, and so they have to figure out like what they mean here. But they accepted basically in good faith, but it wasn't.
Okay, so hold on, let me just give my side, and then you can give your side. Okay.
Your quotes are supporting my argument.
Okay, yeah, sure they are. Okay, so number one is they wanted more land. Number two, quote, in the field of security, the presidential ideas differ from the Israeli ones with regard to the Palestinian police and security force, the mandate of the international force, and the monitoring of the non-militarization of Palestine. In other words, they want more Israeli presence. Number three, it also calls on Clinton to remove any ambiguities in his parameters per the right of return of the refugees. That is, quote, any entry of refugees to Israel shall be a matter of sole sovereign Israeli discretion. So on all three key issues when it comes to borders, security, that's sovereignty, and refugees, they don't accept the Clinton parameters. So they said yes, but we don't agree with these three major things. So for you,
that's not what you just read. That's like you're just not. Okay. I don't know what to. Yeah, I'm not even sure. Yeah, geez.
Yeah. Okay.
This would be a great opportunity.
Okay, go ahead. So meanwhile, as far as Arafat, he agreed to no right of return and was just seeking to get refugees
absolutely
accepted into the Palestinian state. Yes, he
Arafat?
only wanted.
Arafat agreed to no right of return. It's such an unbelievable statement.
You can read it in page 400, expressing his concern.
Page
that Israel
400 of
not-
what?
Can I finish?
Can you tell me what you're reading out of, please? If you're going to live in quotes, at least. Yeah, page 400 of what?
Clayton Swisher's book?
No, I don't. What's that
Swisher's
called?
Book that's literally on the Camp David Accords. It's
Okay.
the most famous book on this issue.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so all right, so
And he says that Arafat
can
gave
you
up
let
the
me
right of
finish?
return.
So he wanted the right of return only for the Palestinian state, which is like giving it up from Israel, which would risk its demographic nature. Correct?
There's no shot that Arafat ever agreed to this, but
Okay. All right. So yeah, so you don't know what you're talking about.
Clearly not, yeah.
So that's number one. So he just wanted reassurance that it wouldn't be under Israel's prerogative that Palestinians could return to the Palestinian state. Number two, Clinton said 94 to 96% of West Bank with 1 to 3% swaps. Arafat reasonably asked, which land are you talking about? Number three, period of Israeli withdrawal he thought was too long because he feared that Israel would renege like they always do and entrench themselves. So he simply asked for clarification. Is the period you're talking about one of the fixed parameters or not? Those were the major points. He agreed to immediately meet Clinton to get these clarifications. So now you can weigh both sides and you can make your assessment who had the greater reservations. To me, it's clear that the Israeli side had much greater reservations, whereas the Palestinians are willing to give up their right of return, which is like, I would never give that up, but they are willing to give that up.
the actual, like, you can read both, like, the reservations. I think it's like a 22-page PDF. I don't know why you would have to read somebody else's summary
that's
of
for
it.
That's for the Israeli side. That's not the summary that I read. That's my notes that I read to you.
Oh, it sounded like you were just reading from Clayton Swisher. I don't know why we'd read his summary
Clayton
of...
Swisher was the citation for an expert in the field.
We don't need an
just
expert.
read-
Dude, you literally just have the document.
Yeah,
they
I
just
do.
have the PDF.
No,
Like, you just read what the Israeli
That's
reservations
not what
were.
scholars do. That's not what scholars do.
Oh, my
The scholars
bad.
read both
They
the
selectively
primary
quote, yeah.
and the secondary sources.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
This might
And
be
then
a great
number-
opportunity. Let's
Can I
jump into
just
the
say that-
Q&A.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
I want to say a couple of quick housekeeping things. First, we were very excited. Tiger King, this is for real. The audio might not be perfect tomorrow. I want to give you a heads up. It'll be a 15-minute call. It will be for real, though. So we're excited about that. Destiny versus Tiger King on Trump versus Harris. You don't want to miss it. Check it out tomorrow. It'll be live. And that's 4 p.m. Eastern. With that, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your patience. We're going to jump right into these questions. Yeshua the King says, Palestinians are the most privileged, oppressed group? Why? Because I don't see anyone marching or speaking out for North Koreans, a true open-air prison.
Whose question is that for? I'm assuming that's for me, but
Either of you can respond if you want.
so, as Norman Finkelstein says, you can't predict which issue in the world is going to attract the attention of people. For example, it was in the 1980s South Africa, and defenders of apartheid South Africa would always do whataboutism and say, what about all the other terrible regimes in Africa? Look how big bad, look at the neighborhood we live in. Exactly arguments that Destiny has raised in the past about Israel and Palestine. So you can't predict that. But this is standard whataboutism. As far as the differential, as far as support, I mean, there's not even any comparison. Historically, Israelis have had the support of very powerful factions, a very powerful Zionist lobby, which influences actual policy. And just now, in the last few years, you have awareness, and unfortunately, it's taken a genocide to really create this momentum, and I hope that it continues.
So coming in from, any thoughts, Stephen?
No, not yet.
Muhammad says, Dr. Javad, let's see. He says he's a fan. Jordan says, hey, gotcha. Muhammad says, got that. Looking for more sincere questions rather than insults. History Speaks says, in the birth of the Palestine refugee problem, page 28, Morris notes the Yishuv planned to deny citizenship to 45% Arab minority to make it easier to potentially expel them in the future. So Destiny is wrong on Yishuv accepting Arab minority.
What was I? Say that. Re-say that.
Now he's going to be confused.
They said, in the birth of the Palestinian refugee problem, so the book, they say page 28, Morris notes the Yishuv planned to deny citizenship to the 45% Arab minority to make it easier to potentially expel them in the future.
The point is they never accepted them as the 45%. That's the point. And History Speaks, by the way, you blocked him. You should unblock him, and you should actually debate him on this topic.
Let's-
He's an actual
let me
academic.
finish History Speaks' super chat though. They say, so Destiny is wrong on Yeshiv accepting Arab minority. Thoughts, Stephen?
I can't argue with a single quote. I don't know what I'm supposed to like. I
It's
can't.
an academic who's
the
made a
Yeshuv,
conclusion.
like the like it. I would also need to know the year at which this was said because it dramatically changes. Like how would you interpret a particular thing? Also, I was curious. I bought this the book over the Camp David stuff because I was curious. Which page did you say it said that Arafat agreed that refugees could come back, but only to because in his letter to Clinton he doesn't say that.
Okay, let me. Well, what does he say about it? Tell me.
I have many questions relating to the return of refugees to their homes and villages. I have a negative experience with the return of displaced Palestinians to the West Bank and Gaza during the interim period.
Oh.
Because the modalities remained tied to an Israeli veto, not one refugee was allowed to return through the mechanism of the interim agreement, which required a quadripartite committee of Egypt, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine to decide on their return. So it seems like he's explicitly not saying that he accepts them not being able to go back into Israel.
You're right that he's not explicitly saying it, but he is implicitly accepting the idea and just trying to get that in the West Bank and Gaza. Correct? Do you accept that, or is that too far a stretch for your brain to understand?
No, he's explicitly not accepting it.
He's saying, how do I know? Because the Clinton parameters were that the bulk of the entire point of the Clinton parameters is that the refugees are supposed to go to the Palestinian state, and any resolution should not threaten the demographic of Israel. So, did he counter any of that? Did he say he has any problem with that?
He didn't agree to anything.
He's seeking clarification on what the Clinton parameters.
Yes, but he didn't agree to anything. Arafat is always seeking clarification. Even quoting your own author, he says that as with any other contract or important binding document affecting the fate of nations, it would have been unconscionable for either the Palestinians or the Israelis to make any commitments to Clinton's guidelines without having the clearest understanding of all the terms presented. So this idea that Arafat accepted any of this was not true. Okay. It wasn't true. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I agree. Yes.
All right. Go ahead. Keep going.
So coming in from, do appreciate
next
it.
question.
The globalist says,
to be clear, you said that he accepted it. He didn't accept it. You lied about that, right? Yeah.
No, I did not. I told you what Clayton Swisher has, like a scholar, has understood about it. So, number two is...
So you didn't say that he accepted refugee... Okay.
You're literally trying to run away from History Speaks. That's what you're trying to do. You block the guy. You should debate him. He'll talk to you about the kill ratio thing that you've obsessed over.
No, I'm good. I don't... Talking to fake scholars is already driving me insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is from the globalist says, mask just lifted there on Dr. Hashmi. Of course, the Arabs would want genocide. Is what he just said meaning he thinks they did try to genocide us? Why does he complain?
I never said that. I said the exact opposite, that this is every accusation, Zionist accusation is Zionist confession. Because historically, by the way, Muslims and Arabs have not engaged in the pogroms and the mass slaughters and forced conversions that were the case in Europe. And anti-Semitism is, unfortunately, a modern phenomenon that is, unfortunately, a large response, that doesn't justify it, to the conflict. And as soon as you resolve this conflict, you'll see that things improve. So this kind of blinkered view that you have of Arabs and Destiny has this. He has the view that you can't have a one-state solution, because if you have the one-state solution, the Arabs are going to slaughter the Jews, just like the South African whites said we can't extend the right of voting to blacks because they will slaughter us. So that's just historically untrue.
Do you think that a two-state solution is unfair? Would you reject all two-state solutions?
I do not reject all two-state solutions, but the problem is that there's a contradiction in Zionism whereby they can't really accept. So it's the paradox.
Well, sure, no, but I'm asking, let's say tomorrow there was on the table, there was a two-state solution that would go back to the 67 borders. It'd be a full independent Palestinian state. They'd even get their highway or underpass to connect the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Do you think that would be a fair or acceptable resolution?
I mean, fair or acceptable, I would say it's acceptable. And I would say, given the circumstances, it would be, like I said, acceptable, and I would accept it. As far as fair, I mean, history was not fair on the Palestinians.
Okay. And what do you think should be done about the division of Al-Aqsa Mosque? Do you think Jews should still be allowed to pray at the Western Wall?
Well, I think if you're going to go for rest everything you have on the UN partition plan that was non-binding, the only binding one that Destiny wants,
I never
then
said
you should
it
also
had to be binding.
Yeah. No, every time that a General Assembly resolution is brought up in other situations, then you say they're non-binding. You said that in Lex Friedman in debate.
It depends on the context of the thing.
No,
But I mean, like, it doesn't matter.
Yes,
I mean,
if
like,
it's pro-Zionist,
it doesn't matter.
If it's Zionist, then it's binding. If it's against the Zionists, then it's non-binding.
Zionists don't care. Zionists wipe their ass with UN resolutions because they don't matter. They don't do anything in this region of the world because the Arabs don't respect them. So why would the Jews?
The entire Israeli state is based on that resolution. So don't say that, okay?
No,
Number two,
the
your
state is
entire
based
Zionist-
on war. But
I agree with you.
Thank
but
you.
The entire
Okay, cool.
and justification, the pretext for it, is that General Assembly resolution. Anyways, and that's why you defend that narrative to the tilt. Now, to answer your question, according to that resolution, Jerusalem was to be an international city. And so I agree that something like an internationalized region could be, but I'm not. That's not something that's.
that's fine. Sure. International city where Jews are allowed to worship in the Second Temple, in the Temple Mount.
I am about religious freedom and maintaining religious liberties for people. And so this is not something, to be very honest, your question, I'd have to really think about it. I haven't thought about it.
Okay.
This one coming in from, do appreciate your question from History Speaks, says the HOLO cost began summer 1941 and ended in 1945. Zionist terrorism against the British in 1939 to 1940 and 1946, e.g. bombing of King David Hotel, was not just about immigration restrictions during the Holocaust, but about opposition to Jewish state.
Correct.
Any thoughts?
It was a response to the 1939 white paper.
I think it's amazing that the mentally disabled can participate in online donation stuff, on watching their favorite streamers. I'm happy for them. I'm championing them. I'm clapping for them.
We should go to the next one. I'm sorry.
So wait, just one thing I want to say, one sentence, which is Arabs and Palestinians are to be chastised because they supposedly rejected, which they did, the UN Partition Plan of 1947, and the entire Nakba is justified on that basis and whitewashed by destiny. But on the other hand, when Zionists, you did whitewash. I'll show you how you whitewashed it. You tried to downplay. You said only 10 to 20,000 people fled, were expelled.
It was like 700,000. What are you talking about?
I have the.
Yeah, what is the receipt? What did I say? 10 to 20,000. What?
Okay. I come with receipts, my friend. So,
okay.
But wait, let me finish my second
bad.
point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is that. But on the other hand, so Arabs and Palestinians are supposed to be condemned for their rejection of that partition plan. But on the other hand, when Zionists respond with terrorism and violence and killing, throwing bombs in markets, cafes, buses, blowing up hotels, killing police officers, assassinating ambassadors, when they do all of that in response to the white paper of 1939, not a peep.
I don't know who said there's not a peep, but I guess not. Okay.
Okay. And then I'd like to show the quote that you say.
Yeah. I already know what he's about to quote. You're about to quote me giving the number of people that I think fled because their cities or villages were being directly attacked, as opposed to people that fled because they were worried about potential attacks.
Here's your quote. Here's
Yeah,
your
go
quote.
ahead.
You're right.
Yeah.
And then I'll give you a response.
Okay.
Quote, it was like, I'm glad you should know what you say.
I do. I remember most of it. Yeah, believe it or not.
Okay. I mean, when you motor mouth, but anyways, quote.
Why do you call yourself a PhD when you're still a candidate? Isn't that like against the rules or something? Like if you haven't defended a thesis yet, are you allowed to call yourself a doctor?
I'm a physician. That's why I'm a doctor.
Oh, fuck. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Fuck you, chat. You got me on that one.
Have called you. I shouldn't have said motor mouth. I apologize.
Okay.
And by the way, I do think that it's impressive how you debate. I think you're pretty remarkable from that standpoint, and good luck with your debate.
Thanks. It's the cookies
okay.
that get me.
Okay. So this is your quote. It was like 20,000 people who were, or 10 to 20,000 people who were driven from their homes. The rest left because they were worried about violence, but not 700,000. They were not driven from their homes. This is in your debate with Umar Badr, timestamp 3900. And here is the response. Okay. The response is, first, British Middle East Office issued a report in August 1948. Quote, the initial difficulty of persuading the Arabs of Palestine to leave their homes has been overcome by Jewish terrorism and Arab panic. Morris, Birth, page 40. Okay. And then more clearly, Benny Morris, quote, there is a clear chronological one-to-one correspondence between the Jewish offensives and the flight of the bulk of the population from each town and district attacked. Plan D, it accorded the Haganah carte blanche to completely clear vital areas of Arab population. Most villagers fled before or during the fighting. Those who stayed put were almost invariably expelled. Birth, pages 592 to 593. So the point is, they didn't. You tried to portray it as it was just the violence. They were scared of violence. No, It was Zionist terrorism that they were fearful of because the Zionist terrorism was intended to create that panic and cause them to flee, including they used to use loudspeakers with crazy sounds and noises to try to create fear and havoc.
You're restating what I said. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of, you literally just said at the end. Yes, that's what I said. Yes.
Imagine if I said, well, actually you did it, so I don't need to imagine it.
Okay.
That, the Native Americans weren't ethnically cleansed. Do you think the Native Americans were ethnically cleansed?
I don't use ethnic cleansing prior to 91. I think it's a really silly concept to try to
So before
retroactively.
1990, no one was ethnic. So what happened to the Native Americans? What do we describe that as?
I don't like the term genocide. I just think it just
I
feels
didn't say
weird
genocide. I said
to.
ethnic. Do you know the difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide?
Well, yeah, but if you know the difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide, you wouldn't describe what happened to the Native Americans as ethnic cleansing. I think you would describe it as a genocide. No. If you're going to use one of the ethnic cleansing, theoretically, if you want to apply it, I think it technically just means you're removing somebody from a particular piece of land just based on their either ethnic, national, religious, whatever.
Acts of ethnic cleansing,
sure,
and acts of genocide when it came to the Native Americans.
We'll jump to the next one. Even Lord, it says, if the Israelis didn't like the party members of the Third German Empire, why did they recruit them into the Mossad and other intelligence groups?
Because they were the real Nazis the whole time. They needed somebody to help them plan 9/11.
This one from Even Lord says, Mr. Bennell, why did you blacklist? Let's see.
I think we should say
Not really pertinent, Even Lord. I just want to.
Thomas, it's against destiny. Don't.
What was it, Javad?
I mean, we shouldn't do the ones that are just insulting either me or him.
I don't understand. It's not even insulting. I don't understand. They claim that Stephen blacklisted Mr. Wilson.
Andrew Wells said yes, because the guy's a little insane and unhinged. And he just does weird personal attacks all day. Yeah.
They say, let's see. Will you apologize, Stephen, for inciting hatred and violence on X? They think that you're inciting hatred and violence on X.
Well, if I am, then I'm sure they'll ban me for it.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I haven't. I don't know the proof of that, but
this one from Thomas D says, Mr. Bargadell, do you think the Palestinians would show as much restraint as Israel if the roles were reversed?
Well, all I know is
you're not Mr. Bargadelli. That was for Steven.
Oh, I apologize.
No, that has to be a question for him. That should be a question for him. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Okay, but yeah. So this is a point that Destiny has made, and this is a Sam Harris reverse scenario. What if Hamas was in control? They would want a genocide. These are what ifs, counterfactuals. Well, Hamas wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Israel's occupation, ethnic cleansing, and now genocide. All these factors, occupation, these things. So these kind of counterfactuals are silly. What I do know is that according to Benny Morris in his book 1948, we can just compare who had the greater atrocities during the war. In the 1948 war, according to Benny Morris, there were only 2 or 3 Arab massacres. Did the Arab states come in? Did they massacre? They did conquer some towns. Did they massacre people? Did they kill civilians? No. In fact, when the Arab states got involved, he says that they actually did follow the Geneva Conventions mostly, and that the massacres all happened more on the Jewish side. This is Benny Morris who's saying that. And this is in the conclusion of 1948, in his book 1948, that the Arabs, the Zionist side had more massacres, they had more rapes, and they had, of course, more ethnic cleansing.
So do you think that the Arabs thought that the Jews in 48 were going to massacre and kill all the people that fled? That's why they fled, because they were so worried about it? Or do you think that those fears were probably largely overblown?
No, they were not overblown. There was the Dar Yassin massacre. There were several other massacres that occurred that you're not going to, when you have kids, you're not going to take a chance and say, right, that's what those kind of massacres are designed to invoke. Right?
Why do you think in 67 they were like, fuck it, we're not going to run this time? And they didn't actually all run from the Gaza Strip or the West Bank?
Well, that's a great question, actually. So so for example, in the current Gaza crisis, the reason why Egypt closed down the border was because the Palestinians and everyone knows that they now know from Israel's practice, because in 1948, when they fled, they thought they could come back. But Israel has created a pattern where once you leave your land, you're never allowed back. Even if you're a citizen, a resident in Jerusalem, for example, you leave, you go to study abroad, they will strip you of your residency. Like this has happened on multiple occasions. So That's the reason why after this pattern was established, Palestinians are much more resistant of fleeing and giving up their land because
Yeah.
of
So in
Israel has a
'67 they didn't
policy
flee.
of
Yeah,
not
because they
fleeing.
weren't
But there
sure
was
they'd be
a,
able to come back. But they also didn't think they
know,
were
there
all
was
going to be
another
massacred
ethnic,
and killed. Right. That's why they
there
didn't
was
flee in
another.
'67.
You don't know that there was another ethnic cleansing in 1967 called the Nuska?
From which
Naksa, sorry.
regions? From where?
From the this was in the West Bank
How many people fled
and
from this
probably in the
one?
Gaza too. There were a few 100,000. I can give you the exact number.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So the 1967 Nuska, um, and by the way, this was by Israel's third prime minister who said in 1967 the same problem was present: how to get rid of all these Arabs. He said in a closed meeting, quote, "I want them all to go, even if they go to the moon." That's the Israeli policy.
Wait, why would you describe what's going on today as a second Nakba then? Wouldn't this be the third one?
You could say that,
Okay.
but they gave
Thanks for
another
coming
term
in,
for it.
Tom. Do appreciate it. Thomas D says, is it a fact that Jews, I don't know what this refers to. Is this something inappropriate? The globalist says, please,
Let's not do this.
can we move to the current conflict and not the formation because the current situation is Enlightenment values versus Shadi Islam? Please debate why Hamas is being legitimized versus IL.
IL, is that not Islamic? Is that Islamic law? I'm talking about international humanitarian law. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not an Islamist. I'm a proponent of international law, unlike, unfortunately, Destiny. He doesn't think international law is important. He
It's
stated
not
so
true,
much on
but
the
okay.
Lex
Yeah.
Friedman podcast. Well, you said that on the Lex Friedman podcast. You
I
said that.
never said that.
So actually, it's Israeli policy that we don't want to go to international bodies for a resolution. We want bilateral negotiations, which means lopsided negotiations between a powerful party and a weaker party. So this is actually not a coincidence that people like you did say that. That's why Moeen Rabbani responded so eloquently to you. Do you not remember when he said to you about the law of the jungle and your view? You don't remember that?
No, I don't remember a lot of what he said. It was pretty crazy because I had an insane dude screaming at me, some crackhead across the table for the entire time.
He wasn't even addressing you. And by the way, I'd like to thank Norman Finkelstein for answering my emails over the years. I know that he didn't
Come
want
on,
to
we can
debate
talk
you.
about your friend Norm later. Punk Giver says, don't care about Palestine or Israel. Give us the kingdom of Jerusalem back. Call the Pope.
Based.
This one from Panda Boom says, Javad. Arab states already sent volunteers to fight Jews in 1947. CALA in quotes. Lahi and IZL didn't start the war. They escalated in response to Arab attacks with more than 70 Jews killed in week 2.
That is 100% not true. The Lehi and Irgun attacks, the Irgun terrorism, started virtually immediately after the UN resolution. So it's completely not true. The ALA took a few months to come in. I think it was even in the beginning of the year, next year. So I can get you the exact date if you want, though.
Even Lord says for both, what is the problem of an ethno-supremacist nation state defeating and expanding against their neighbors and rivals? I believe might makes right.
That's Destiny's viewpoint.
True, based.
This one from Thomas D says, who wins in a fight, Israel, Eren Yeager, or Light? What does this mean?
Does Light have his death note or not? Who knows?
The Globalist says, I think they're trying to gouge you. They say Mr. Hashmi is pure propaganda, does not discuss how we get to peace, justifying the genocide of Jews because something happened years ago. How do we get to peace with Hamas and terror?
Well, that's a great question. So there's not a genocide going on right now against Jews. If there was, I would stand up against it. I try to be principled in my stances. But right now there is a plausible genocide being committed against the Palestinians, and I definitely oppose that. And so that's the real genocide. As far as how we get to peace, I'm a supporter of the one state binational solution. And I recommend reading on this for those who are interested. The book that shifted me on this, because I used to be a resolute two-stater, is it's called One Country by Ali Abu Nima. That really shifted. And really all that amounts to is giving everybody under Israeli control, which is already a one state, equal rights and democracy. And that's what a liberal should actually support.
You got it. This one from I says Destiny has to resort to trolling. And they say when he gets outclassed, they say constant is just, they say, yeah.
Oh,
Even Lord says Destiny joking about cookies like Nick Fuentes. Heck. The globalist says he needs to stay in the past. The present is Jihadi Islam, and he cannot admit that. The current fight is the Muslim Brotherhood's Hamas versus Islamic law.
The present conflict is a genocide being carried out by Israel.
This one from Panda Boom says Javad Gurion's quote, I gotta be saying that a lot, in 47 through 48 about not accepting 45% of Arabs in Israel is false. He referred to future Jewish immigration to build a stronger majority and not about kicking the Arabs.
So you're telling me that he issues a statement 1 month before Plan Dalit, and you're saying that there's no connection. So what you have is a consistent collection of quotations such that Benny Morris has said there's a consensus or near consensus on forced transfer, which is ethnic cleansing, and it goes all the way up to Plan Dalit, and we're saying that there's no connection. Okay.
This one coming in from L says, we got that one. Panda Boom says, Javad, Israel isn't occupying the West Bank. UTI, Hasiditis,
This idea of like people like just like, well, this and then here's two quotes. It's like this can't be real. I don't know if it's like if there's like a fucking a PhD degree mill or something out there. Well, I don't understand where the idea that this is a real thing comes from. Is insane to me.
Opinion are fallacies.
Okay. So this is a good question that he asked because Destiny in the past has said that it's not sure if they're occupied territories. When he's talking about apartheid,
Like he's even quoting me to myself.
occupied, because then he says that apartheid doesn't apply, even though he's wrong.
Why does he keep calling it apartheid?
Example
I don't know
he
why
always
he's
asks,
saying
is there ever an occupied territory where they use the term apartheid? Yes. It was literally when it came to South Africa. South Africa occupied Namibia. So they made sure that when they wrote the convention, they said Southern Africa instead of South Africa to make sure to include apartheid in an occupied territory. So that argument that you spent so much time goes to the wayside. And then on the other hand, on other instances, Destiny will say he's not sure. It's maybe disputed territory. So which is it?
If his Harvard bio is accurate, the dude has been studying
This is coming in from.
MD with 2 other degrees. I would think even a doctor would do like but like I said, I have no idea.
Ulti says, I recently started to investigate this. Long story short, Zionism came out of nowhere and started taking people's homes.
You should get a collection of cherry pick quotes on your own to quote
in
back
America,
at them.
we
It's just
bear
so,
arms to make sure that kind of bullshit
point?
doesn't happen to us.
Well, I mean, that's a very oversimplified way of looking at things, but broadly, I would say it's correct that for the Palestinians, you had these Zionist settlers coming out of nowhere and wanting to take away their homes, and I think Americans would fight back. Like, I think Cenk Uygur said to Destiny, he's got a gun in the back. I think he would also want to fight back and, have liberty or death.
This one from Tim Owen 09 says, Destiny, will you please watch Mr. Anderson versus Dr. Dino debate? Okay. Mikey P says, question for Javad. You said, quote, Chamsha, am I saying that right? In reference to Destiny. I was wondering what that meant. I couldn't find what it meant.
It means spoon. It's a word that we use for somebody who's a propagandist.
Based.
Oi Ulti says, thanks for the platform, guys. Thanks for your kind words. They said, I'm personally sad for innocent Israelis born into this. I know they've never asked for this fighting. Jupiter Darman says, hi, Destiny. Hi, James. Love you. Thanks for your kind words. I'm sure they love you too, Javad. Boredom says, does Dr. Hashmi acknowledge the history of animosity against local Arab Jews in Palestine pre-1880s manifesting in pogroms like the looting of Safed, Hebron pogroms in 1834 and the pogroms of Safed in 1838?
So, as a scholar of religious studies and of religious violence in particular, I would follow what the experts say on this issue. And so historically, there have been two viewpoints. The first is what's called the lacrimose theory.
Oh man, is he about to
of
blame Jews
Arab-Jewish
for their own
relations,
pogroms?
which is unfortunately the one that Benny Morris endorses, and so Destiny has also endorsed it, which is the idea that Arabs and Muslims have always oppressed Jews just like they did in Europe. And this is a Zionist propaganda trope that Jews have been oppressed and kicked out of everywhere and persecuted. So that's the lacrimose theory, but experts don't really accept that viewpoint anymore. The counter to this is the extreme on the other side, which is the convivencia viewpoint, which is that it was always a golden period and Jews never had it better and it was amazing and awesome. I take the balanced approach, which is what the mainstream scholarship does. And if you want to read a book on this, I recommend Mark Cohen's book, which is Under Crescent and Cross, which compares the treatment of Jews in Islamic lands historically with those in the Christian West. And he concludes that the treatment was far better when it comes to the Jewish lands, even though, look, it's not going to reach the level of tolerance that we're talking about or demanding in the modern period. If you want to read more on that, you can also read Avi Schleim's work on that, Three Worlds, which is related to Israel and Palestine specifically, and Norman Stillman's work on Arab-Jewish relations. So there's a lot of scholarship on this. So what I would say is, although you can point to specific instances, in the broad stroke of things, the Jews were not a beleaguered minority. They were not specifically targeted in that way that the caller is trying to say.
From watching says, in parentheses, they say, Dr. Javad, how prevalent would you say anti-Semitism is in the Muslim community? And do you want Jews to become dhimmis?
I mean, you're asking me about anti-Semitism when your question is Islamophobic. So the question that I would ask you is, okay, yeah, we can accept that ever since Zionism, there has been this importation of anti-Semitism. Not to say that there weren't any anti-Jewish ideas or thoughts before that, but largely this anti-Semitism is something modern and new due to the Zionist entity. But what about all of the Islamophobia and the anti-Arab sentiment amongst Jewish communities, and especially amongst Zionists and amongst people like Destiny, who has called Arabs, religiously and culturally, socially prone to violence. They they just don't want peace. They're just hungry for war. So what about all of this? Let's look at the polling data of Israel to see what they think of Palestinians and Arabs. They think crazy things about them. They want to expel. The majority of them still want to expel the Palestinians. And in fact, the Palestine Papers revealed that just very recently, in 2008, the Israeli state was trying to get forced transfer even still. And we're talking about Omert's offer. Let's talk about that as well. So
how is it that there are like 100 times more Arabs living in the single Jewish country of Israel than there are Jews living in every other Arab country in the world combined?
Because it was an Arab majority country before Zionists came, and they couldn't complete the job. And Ben Gurion said, damn it, I wish we did complete the job.
Wait, why couldn't they complete the job? If they were trying to kick everybody else. You just gave me all those quotes about transfer. Why didn't they kick all of them out after 48? Because
they actually tell you, the logic, they tell you that unfortunately we can't do that now because of international pressure. And they thought these armistice agreements wouldn't be as lock solid as they were, and so they could no longer do it. But what they did do is they put that percentage of people that were left, no longer 45%, but now a manageable 10 to 15%. They put them under military rule. So for up until 1967, 1966, they were under military rule, in which the military rule was used to impoverish them, to steal more land, to restrict them.
Well, they were under military rule because all the surrounding Arabs were trying to kill them, right? That was the whole issue. That was why. But number one. But number two, if they really planned out it was to expel all the Arabs the entire time, why would they have just expelled all of them? It's interesting that they didn't do that, yeah.
So you're actually a proponent of crackpot realism, which is that you can so this is a scholarly term used for the idea that you can justify any endeavor using security. And the perfect example of this is your claim that they blocked cookies from Gaza because they were going to use those cookies for Qassam rockets. That's crackpot realism. Theoretically, who knows? Maybe they're in a lab and making Qassam rockets out of cookies. I mean, you can't completely say that it's not. But why we know that your claim is false is that Haaretz has released declassified documents which show that there were the Shin Bet actually had a plan to dispossess the Arab minority. And they specifically say it's not because they're a threat, because they weren't a threat. They were actually surprised at the fact that they were so docile. and they were so docile because they were a defeated community at that point in time, and they were also scared for their security. And so they said, actually, when we mean security, we actually mean demography. We mean we need a Jewish majority.
Wait, so if you're telling me that the Shin Bet said that they wouldn't expel these people because it seemed like they didn't represent a threat, doesn't that just kind of further the idea that the people that were expelled were done because they thought that they were going to try to go to war with them, like the Palestinians did and all the surrounding Arabs did? How does that further that there was like a planned ethnic cleansing?
I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat what you said?
If Jews, the claim is Planned Dalit was an ethnic cleansing. It had nothing to do with security, right? It was ethnic cleansing, right?
No, it's not. I didn't say. Did I say that?
That the goal was to get rid of the Arabs.
They specifically thought getting rid of the Arabs was a necessary thing for security.
That's not really an ethnic cleansing then.
Yes, it is. When the Hutus were wiping out the Tutsis, they thought they had to do that because of the security, because they thought that there were massacres on the other side.
Hold on, let me just check. If there is a war between two sides, and as part of the war, one side is trying to kill the other, and when the other side fights back in areas where the side that's trying to kill them is present, and they expel those people from areas, you consider that ethnic cleansing? It's part of a war?
Do you think the Hutu Tutsis?
I'm not answering anything about the Tutsis already. Okay, I'm curious. Would you consider that to be an ethnic cleansing?
It's not about what I consider. It's like there's no debate about this. Ethnic cleansing, even Benny Morris, like I said, doesn't disagree with this. He just says, what Benny Morris says is, yes, it was ethnic cleansing, but it was justified because of war. He doesn't deny that it's
ethnic because he calls it a transfer.
Until later,
it's not
he did when it became a propaganda.
Well, he did because it's a stupid term, because it's a nonsense term, right? That everything that we don't like in war is like a genocide and an ethnic cleansing and apartheid, because we have to use the biggest words possible, because if we do, well, they need the fact on the ground, like that it looks horrible.
Are you going to eat your words now about apartheid? You can't use apartheid because of it's an occupied territory. Are you going to eat those words now?
What are we eating words for? I'm just saying it's strange that now you're giving me security justifications for why people weren't expelled in 47, 48, when that's the Zionist term, is that they expelled people because of security reasons. I thought it was just an ethnic cleansing because they hated Arabs.
Okay, so there was a committee created to deal with the Arab issue. This is what was released in the Haaretz paper, Haaretz articles. I can give you the link if you want. And they said that it's literally not about security in that sense. Our intent, quote, is to preserve Israel as a Jewish state. That is the central problem. When we say security, this is what's meant, not necessarily a revolution by the Arabs.
This is in reference to what? Articles. Yeah, in reference to what? At what time period?
A military. Now it's always about the time period. You're going to say it's not the time period you're interested in. It's exactly after 1948 when they put them under military rule, which was the exact conversation that we were having.
Why do you get so mad when I ask for a year? Why does that upset you so much? We're talking about history. You understand that, like, the history, that the year is important. I don't know why you get so upset about this.
You asked. I'm not upset, my friend. When you well, I mean, I don't like when people are genocide or ethnic cleansing, defenders. That's not something that I like. I don't like people who go to trips to those countries. But in any case, the second point I wanted to ask you is specifically on the apartheid question. You have made it a huge thing that you've repeated numerous times, that it can't be apartheid because it's occupation. Do you now eat those words? Because I just told you that in literally the protocols that they created, they made sure to include Namibia, which is occupied territory by South Africa, because they wanted to make sure to include that as well.
I don't understand what we're talking about here. That Israel wanted to include Namibia, South Africa. What are we referring to in specifics here?
You have said in the past.
Don't quote me. I'm right here. You don't have to quote me in the past. I'm right here. My position on this hasn't really changed. So what?
Yes. Well, no, I'm going to quote you because when I think you're really good at what you do, you're a professional BSer. But for a professional BSer, it's important to come with receipts. So I came with receipts today. Okay. Because I want to tie you
should have comprehensive understanding next time instead of just like random quotes from books. Yeah, you should understand like the context before and after. Yeah.
Okay, you tell me, did I misrepresent your view? You said that it can't be apartheid because apartheid does not apply to an occupied territory. It only applied to, and you go like, citizens in your own country. Did you not say that? Isn't that your argument that you've been making?
I would have to know the debate. No, the argument that I've been making is that apartheid is usually referring to a system of racial domination that applies to your citizens in your country. That's what makes apartheid like so uniquely horrible.
What did I just say? Didn't I just say that?
The racial domination part is important, and you're applying it to your own citizens.
I didn't say
people in the West Bank and Gaza aren't the citizens of Israel.
That's a
you have a situation is kind of sort of like what?
That's a separate argument about race, and we can get to that. But the first point is that you hung your hat on the fact that it's occupied territory. And it's the occupation. You said, I don't care about the apartheid because it's the occupation.
Sure, the occupation is the reason for if you want to say there's apartheid conditions, they're not there because of an apartheid. They're there because of an occupation. The occupation has to be solved. When the occupation goes away, whatever apartheid we think exists also goes away. Yes.
So that's not true because, as Amnesty International has said, Israel overall including within the Green Line, but overall is an apartheid state.
That's funny. That's great for Amnesty International, but that's a that's a joke of a statement.
No.
Okay.
What's
Not
a
only
joke
is
of
it a
a
joke of a
statement
statement,
is
even in my
somebody who didn't know where
conversations
Palestine
with
is.
Bet Salem, they admit as much that when they use apartheid, they just kind of like use it as like, well, the situation is bad. But to say that
nobody
apartheid
says
exists
that. There are
inside of the
literal
country,
scholars
inside
and
of the country
historians.
of Israel with Arabs and Jews is ridiculous.
There's literally scholars and historians who have written on this topic, and the book that I would give you is called South Africa and Israel. I have it here somewhere, which is by scholars. It's called Israel and South Africa. It's edited by your favorite scholar, Ilan Pape, but it's multiple scholars who write on it.
What is the give me the strongest example of apartheid in Israel proper between Jews and Arabs? What do you think is the strongest example of that?
Even Benny Morris has said
Benny
the West
Morris
Bank.
is not an example. That's not in.
Yeah, now all of a sudden Benny Morris doesn't matter, but before that, he was your best friend. But okay, so what I'm saying is
I just said, can you give me
is the strongest example of apartheid, but it applies overall as well because there are 50 discriminatory laws in Palestine, Israel proper. You thought that there's equality between Arabs
I'm asking
and
you.
Israelis
I'm asking
and
you.
Israelis.
What is the strongest example of apartheid in Israel proper?
West. Oh, in Israel proper? Easy.
Yes, there you go.
Okay, so number one, we can talk about land. There's a land regime, right? When you're talking about apartheid, you're talking about land, zoning, and houses, right? So there are zoning policies, a land regime where there was a confiscation. There was a huge confiscation post 1948 using the military rule.
We're not talking about. We're not talking about now. We're talking about today. We're in the last
So you're
like
talking
5 years. Right now, today. We didn't say it was an apartheid in 1948. We're talking about today, right now.
So
What is an apartheid in
fine,
Israel
fine.
proper?
So no problem. I'm getting there. I'm going chronologically. Okay. So number one, they dispossessed the Palestinians over the course of 2 decades.
Can we do it? Okay, I got
number two.
Okay.
Number two.
Just as a heads up, I have to leave
get
like
it.
10:55. I got like 2, 3,
That's
or
fine.
4 minutes. Okay. You can just say
okay,
just today. What is the strongest example of apartheid today?
So zoning and segregation policies. Almost like
Segregation
70%
and
of
zoning
Jewish
does not.
communities-
Even if we were to accept that that there is zoning, that's not
70
apartheid.
Dude, literally, Israel has. Yes, it is. If you have places where blacks can't go and only whites can live because they're not considered socially acceptable, that would be falling under the description of apartheid. But it would be one point in the direction of apartheid. We're talking about Israel overall. It's a point in favor of saying that. Number two is you literally have a Israeli policy of Judaization. It's literally they talk about it that we're going to Judaize the various areas, and in order to do that, they actually cordon off the Bedouin tribes, and they actually push them off of their land further. So when Umar Badr said to you that it's ethnic cleansing in slow motion, and you laughed at that, that's what he was talking about.
No, I don't know. I
were
know that
ignorant
in
about
Israel
that.
proper, there are areas, I know that there are some protected areas that are supposed to represent certain religious groups of people, some for Muslims and some for Jews. But the idea that like Muslims are being pushed out of all their neighborhoods or pushed out of whatever, no, that's not true. But people are welcome to go and look this up. And none of what you said, whether or not there is some racism or segregation that exists in the country to some extent, which it does in every country, that does not make for apartheid. No.
Okay, this is what according to Ben White, who's written on this, more than 90% of the land in Israel is state-owned or controlled, a mechanism designed to keep land in Jewish hands. Officials are well aware of the advantages that bodies like the JNF and JA bring, the Jewish National Fund and the Jewish Agency bring. It facilitates discrimination in a way that would not be possible by the state. Do you understand what's going on here? Since
None of what you
1947,
just said is none of that is apartheid. It's basically going to be impossible to argue for apartheid when Arabs can literally be part of the government.
Is apartheid in West Bank? Is apartheid in the West Bank? Yes.
No,
or no?
it's not really. But I mean, the conditions are kind of
then
similar
why are you
there.
making okay, all right. So your entire argument rested on the fact that it was occupied territory. So that falls apart.
I don't think
Now
it
your
falls
next
apart. Do you
argument-
agree that if the West Bank was its own state, do you think the apartheid would? If we say there's an apartheid, do you think it would still exist?
If the West Bank, I mean, then it would be, you'd have to reevaluate the situation. I'm not sure if it would meet the criteria of apartheid.
Yeah, because the issue is that it's an occupied territory, not that it's an
question is,
apartheid.
No, that's not true. I just told you that that's not true because of Namibia, right? So Namibia was occupied by South Africa, and yet everybody said that that is apartheid.
I'm not talking about South Africa. I don't really care about South Africa.
You were making the comparison yourself to South Africa.
I'm not making a
when you made this point.
Holy shit!
Can you guys hear me? My
It's terrible audio, but we can hear you.
mic.
70% of all communities in Israel work through admission committees criteria that creates a filter for who can live there.
You think
Guess who is
70%
usually
of communities, so if I go to Tel Aviv, I'm not going to find any Arabs living anywhere. If I go to Jerusalem, I'm not going to find Arabs living anywhere.
Oh, you're telling me that you're not going to go to Israel and see Jewish-only communities? Like you're not going to see
I didn't
that?
say you're not going to see Jewish-only communities. There are certain communities that are religiously protected, but the whole country is not segregated off of
There's
on
literally
strict religious
national
lines.
priority areas where the
we have to
budget
move to
is
the next one.
dedicated
I hate
to
to
make
do
it
this,
Jewish
guys.
only.
Okay.
We just have a few more questions, and then I want to squeeze in if again. Corey Rice says, Dr. Hashmi, why do you say scholars do not go off of primary material sources and only go
didn't
by
say that.
secondary sources?
That's a lie. I didn't say that. I said they go off both. If you do a PhD, the first thing that you learn is that the first step is to read the secondary literature, and then you approach the primary literature, which is the reverse of what lay people who search stuff on Wikipedia and look for Palestine on a map do.
Gotcha. This one, WLZXX says, Javad does he think South Africa is a better country post-apartheid standard of living, crime, etc., has skyrocketed? Would apartheid be justified if it preserves the country? What about Islamic nations?
Again, standard whataboutery, which leans into stereotypes and bigotry. Now it's anti-black bigotry and also anti-Islamic,
There's no way that's true.
anti-Arab
I don't.
bigotry.
There's just.
Yes,
It's just.
it's great.
There's got to be like a
live
meme
in
school that like produces
white
these people somewhere.
ethno-nationalist
I don't know
state
where
full
they
of
come
whites.
from.
Nobody's going to deny that. That's why they wanted to preserve it.
This is
in
the worst
South
guy I've seen
Africa.
Dusty talk to.
That's why
He's
they
a
wanted to
clone of
preserve
the
it
History
in
Speaks
Israel,
guy.
Where it's
I think History Speaks might have actually
Not all of
prepped
them
him
are
for
white,
this
but definitely all
conversation, and then he came in with like all the History Speaks notes. That's my guess.
Them and strip them of their
But, I don't know.
non-European identities, such as what is happening with the Arab Jews.
AAA has a quote. They say Jews and Arabs can coexist. Look at African cities like Gia, Chad. And they say this is from Obama that said that. They say, why is Destiny opposed to one state solution? Does he support the We-Ow Accords? Is he disappointed that ye always lose? And ye is Y-I.
The ones who I oppose a one-state solution. The issue with the one-state solution is that Jewish people feel like if they don't have a state where they have an ethnic majority, where they can protect the Jewish interests, they feel like they are subject to, I don't know, extermination, discrimination, whatever else from some other group of people, and they have no other place in the world that they feel safe that they can retreat to. So, I'm sympathetic towards that, given the history of the Jewish people on the planet. What?
Do you think that Israel is the only place where Jews are safe?
Where Jewish people can have that feeling. I'm sympathetic towards them feeling that.
Safe in America, or more safe in America, or more safe in Israel?
More Jews probably feel like they have more autonomy and more ability to be safe in Israel. Would be my guess.
Really? Because we also get the paradox here, the Zionist paradox, where Israel is constantly under existential threat, and we're living under bomb scares and all this kind of thing, where our lives were about to be wiped out. And at the same time, you're supposed to say that Israel was created to make it a safe place for Jews. Actually, this is where Zionists have completely failed. Their entire ideology has failed. It emerged in the 19th century because they felt that Jews could not be assimilated or accepted anywhere else in the world. But that turned out to be false. In European countries, Western European countries, America especially, Jews have flourished and have a golden age. And that's what's actually we should support as liberals. We should support pluralism and civic nationalism, not ethno-nationalism, which is an idea like, for example, there were black nationalists who also said that and said we should go back to Africa. And that's what happened with Liberia. You had blacks who colonized other blacks, and that was a disaster. And in fact, it turned out to be correct that blacks and whites can live together. And they can live together. Arabs and Jews, we don't need Obama to tell us that Arabs and Jews can live together. We know that.
Given that acceptance in the West slowly started to come, and only after literally the Holocaust, and given the idea that there were still plenty of anti-Jewish groups that existed in the United States, all the way up through Jim Crow, people like the KKK and other white nationalist groups, I can understand them feeling a little bit like, I don't know if we really have a lot of stability in these other countries.
Do you think blacks should go back to Africa?
No, why?
Well, Zionism says Jews should go back to Israel. It's not that they can, it's that they almost must go back. That is their obligation.
I don't know what blacks means. Zionists refer to like a particular people. Which ones?
We're comparing white nationalism or black nationalism, black nationalism with Zionism.
I don't think those things are. I don't think I would compare those two things directly.
So, black people, were they persecuted? Were they discriminated against heavily in American history? Were they persecuted?
I would say, yeah, slavery probably counts as
if
that.
If we were living in Jim Crow era, and somebody says, I think it's unrealistic that blacks and whites could ever live together in one state with equal rights. That's just unrealistic. The white people just are not going to accept that. Look at the polling data. What would you say to that now?
What would I say to it now in retrospect?
Yeah,
Well, keep fighting, I guess, because
think-
obviously now I have, with all the benefits of history, I can see that would have worked out.
So with the benefits of history, you can learn the fact that actually, if you have liberal democracy, you can, and pluralism, you can have a multi-ethnic community. Correct?
Well, where? Not everybody
Where
is
you
the
have
multi.
those
I love you,
principles.
and I'm so happy that you are in the West and you're in the United States, and you see that we can successfully do a multi-ethnic community. Not everybody has
so
the
I
same
can-
level of success that we
yeah,
do with
so I
that,
can-
and it's a
so I can even
relatively
tell
new
you-
thing. So that's cool that, like,
So-
in the 50s, 60s
well-
onwards, that we've seen that, yeah, for the United States, it's generally worked so far. Although it's still Jesus Christ, everything is still fucking up in the air. The idea that you would point to the United States and go, well, look at all of the multi-ethnic homogeneity in terms of us getting along with each other we have here. So shouldn't Jews be happy, right? That's an insane proposition. The United States is
think
probably
it's
one of the most
perfectly
diverse
normal.
countries in the world, and we still have issues with it. And the idea that you would look at Jews and go like, yeah, so just throw your lot in with us, it'll be fine, we promise. That's kind of a wild
It's not.
thing. But
Do you think the Arabs and the Palestinians are the ones who said to come to
I
Palestine?
hate to say this.
This would
Let me
be
just
like-
ask a
this
question
would
from
be
the
like black
audience,
people-
Javad.
no, it's not like black people.
appreciate
Jews
it.
had a
One
shared
second,
history.
please,
They have a shared history
Imagine-
coming from one spot, and they had a
imagine-
shared religion of people all over the world.
Imagine me
This
moving
question
to
coming in
Africa
from,
and
I hate
saying,
to do this,
there's
Javad,
so many
but
black
just because
people
we
here.
have a
Oh
lot
my
of
God.
questions from the audience, I do want to get some of these questions too. TriStar Jim says, hey, Destiny, who returned the Jews back to Jerusalem after they were exiled for over 500 years by the Romans in the year
Who?
70? Who rescued the Jews from the Spanish Inquisitions?
Take a guess, Destiny.
In the year? I have no fucking idea.
Yeah. Well, you're
Was
the
it Christians? I don't know. Who?
Oh, it was definitely not Christians.
Was it Arabs?
It was
This one
Muslims. Yeah, it was
This one
Muslims.
from-
Oh, okay.
Yes,
How
sure.
many of those Jews were forced to convert after the Arabs saved them?
They did not force to convert. You're the most ignorant person. on
None of them
earth
were
if
forced.
you think
Oh, they
those
just
are-
got to live as dhimmi
Am I
status,
saying-
where they had
am
to
I
crawl
saying-
on their
do you think
knees
it-
past whenever where they weren't allowed to even ride
That was-
horses or camels or
Okay,
whatever.
let's
Those
talk-
are okay. Yeah,
you-
that was such
you
a
wanted
great
to
life
debate
that they
that.
lived there.
I hate
Okay.
to-
You want to
Okay,
debate
this-
that? That was never enforced, almost.
Oh, never
You can
enforced
read-
almost.
I mean,
Well,
no.
it
So
wasn't
read-
enforced in a lot because a lot of them were just
read
forced to convert or die. I mean, that's true too. Yeah, sure.
Nobody.
okay.
Okay, yeah. Where was the forced conversion? Tell me what.
For
give me one
the first few
example of
caliphates,
mass forced conversion.
these empires literally forced people when they
False.
took over their place. Oh, okay.
False.
My bad. Okay.
False. They actually
from?
just took a tax and left them
Yeshua.
alone.
No,
they in
they-
fact
Yeshua
didn't
the
want
King.
Muslim converts. You don't know anything. You're ignorant.
Yeshua.
Yes, okay.
Yeshua the King says, thoughts on
I'm an
creating a whole
expert
new
on this
state.
topic. You don't know what you're talking about.
And I think this is probably going to be our last question. I think they say, thoughts on creating a whole new state with a completely different name owned by a foreign government, or it will just be a never-ending back and forth.
It's a ridiculous
What?
statement. Arabs and Jews can live together, just like any other two peoples on Earth.
Arabs and
There's
Jews,
a lot of
true.
animosity. There's a lot of animosity between them.
And the Jews have shown us
And,
it's possible, because the only time when both Arabs and Jews have been able to visit their holy sites, like the Temple Mount, has been when Jews have controlled it. So thank you, Jews, for
That's
showing us
completely-
that Arabs and Jews can live together, not as second class, not as dhimmi
Arabs-
citizens. You know, when
Arabs and
Haaretz
Jews
or
have
when
lived-
Bet Salem
So, by the
or
way,
when
dhimmi
Amnesty
status
International
was
has to do their
already
analysis on,
abolished with the
oh,
Ottoman
well, is
Empire.
there an actual apartheid? They don't have to
status-
engage in 50 different discriminatory laws. In an Arab
status
state, they can just say, oh,
was
dhimmi, they're
already
actually
abolished.
literally second class citizens.
Okay, so I need to respond to that because this is a very last minute point that he's putting in. So the Ottoman Empire had already abolished dhimmi status and given full equal rights to Ottoman citizens, all of them, including Jews.
That's not
Again, I know
true.
that-
Part of the
is
initial
100% true.
land
It's called the
purchases
Tanzimat
in the
reforms.
early
It's
1900s.
called the
That's great. That's great. And in the
They
early
literally
1900s,
said-
why did Jewish people have to lie and hide about the land they were buying? Because Jews
Because
weren't even
they-
allowed to
because-
purchase. Jews
because the
weren't allowed to
Ottoman
purchase
Empire-
land in some parts of the Ottoman Empire.
No, the Ottoman Empire said you can settle anywhere that you want, but don't just settle in Palestine and try to make your state there. That's the reason. So they said you're welcome as Ottoman citizens anywhere, but we don't want you to create another state. I wonder why they would say
No,
that.
it wasn't about creating another
Just like-
state. It was to sail
Yeah,
to
yeah,
all
you
Jewish
are.
people
You're
was
wrong.
banned in the Ottoman
And-
Empire.
okay,
I think after like 18.
Wait, the second point I want to make
Yeah.
is not only was there constitutional reforms in Ottoman
I think we
Ottoman era,
just do
but
a
there was
really
also the
pithy one,
Syrian
Javad.
Constitution of 1920, which extended equal rights and disestablished Islam, by the way, and said we want a secular liberal democracy. There's a great book on it by a scholar called How the West Stole Democracy in the Middle East that you should read on that. I have it here somewhere.
This one coming in from, I hate to do this, but sorry, folks. If you happen to ask a question, I do want to get the guys out of here on time. Destiny said, and I know it is late, so I don't blame. It's already 11 p.m. over there. Folks, shoot me an email at moderndebate@gmail.com. Sorry about that if your question was not read. moderndebate@gmail.com. And folks, want to let you know I have just pinned it in the live chat. Tomorrow, Destiny versus Tiger King. This is no joke. It's happening. That's pinned in the live chat. You don't want to miss it. I want to say a huge thank you to our guests. They're linked in the description. Folks, huge. Check out their own primary, you could say, sources. They're straight from the horse's mouth. Even if you disagree, at least you know what you're disagreeing with by checking out their content. So with that, want to say thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll let you guys
Thank
go
you.
for the night.
And thank you, Destiny.
Thank you
I
very much for
appreciate
the
you guys.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, and
Holy fucking AIDS. Okay. I love you. I need to sleep. It was if I saw the History Speaks name, that should just be an auto dodge. There's when somebody just wants to give a quote, I don't know how many other times, I mean, you've either watched me like go through the history of this or you haven't. You can't argue like entire historical events through the lens of a single quote. That's the first huge red flag. So like when we say something like the Jews accepted the partition plan of 47 and you go, well, in 1934, here's a quote from Baghdad, like one where the years are important, right? You're moving in like 3 to 5 year periods where a lot of stuff is changing, especially from 1920 to 1947. So a lot of stuff changing in this area. So when people start citing quotes from like the 20s or the 30s to justify something happened in the 40s, you're already on like very unstable ground. Number one. Number two, your second huge issue is I don't understand how he was not just getting like minor quotes wrong, but hopping around a lot in time. Like, why would we talk about the invasion into Lebanon in 81 or 82 or whatever when talking about like the events going on in the 40s as well? Like, we're jumping through like decades of time here. And then also the idea that whether or not somebody said they wanted to do a thing or not, which is like people want to do all sorts of things. People have aspirations to do all sorts of things. You can find quotes from leaders saying all sorts of things. But you would never quote these as an example of like, oh, so a war started in 67 and the Jews said at like 52 that they wanted they wanted to go to war. Therefore, they started it. Yeah, they wanted war. At least a particular leader did. But it's a democracy. There's a lot of different moving parts and there are a lot of different things that are possible at any particular point in time. Like in order to speak intelligently about a particular event going on, we have to consider all of these particular factors. And nobody, I refuse to believe it. No, hold on. Not I refuse to believe it. I've spoken to enough educated people now that I know no educated person in history would ever tell you that an entire event and the culmination of an event, especially as grand as a war, especially as grand as a multi-party war, can be summarized by like a single quotation. It's just such an unbelievable, it's such an insane way to approach, I would say to approach history, but the guy's not a historian or anything, I guess. Like, holy shit. Yeah, Jesus. But I mean, like, this is like all of these are all these types of debates, I guess. Yeah, my God. Do you think a combo with this guy in History Speaks would be better in a calmer / long form environment, like reading through stuff together? Because while the quotes were annoying, I think he was artistically trying to make a point. I don't give that level of charitability anymore. I think that when you live in quotes, it's because you don't have the context. If I'm asking you, why would Jews want to do a thing? What I would expect is give me like a comprehensive answer talking about, what were the goals? What did people like Herzl oh my God, I'm forgetting the guy's name. Weizmann? Tell me what these people were talking about at the time. Tell me the actions that the country took, and then tell me about the events that are going on. And if you want, you can use a quote to back something up, or you can talk about like a speech that was given or whatever. That's fine. But you have to have like these things all contextually sit within like these grand events. Like imagine if you were trying to quote, like we understand this intuitively. We understand this intuitively when it comes to the modern day, for instance, right? Like, let's say, for instance, we were to go 50 years into the future. Let's say the year is 2070, okay? And let's say somebody says, I want to learn about the economy of the United States in 2025. And you go, oh, okay, well, what about the economy? And somebody says, oh, well, in 2025, I know that the economy was massively bolstered. And the only reason it was booming was because of Donald Trump. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Why would you say that? And I was like, well, look, I've got this quote from Donald Trump where he says that like the economy is only doing well because the stock market is going up because people think I'm going to get elected. And it's like, well, yeah, of course a leader would say a thing, but you need more. We need way more than just one quote from a guy to show like what is happening, right? Like that quote would sit in a context. And the saddest thing, I think the saddest thing is that the most frustrating thing is I wouldn't even necessarily disagree with a lot of points that he's making. He just can't contextualize them, and then it's also one-sided. So like for instance, in 67, that's the 6 Day War is a common talking point. in 67, I don't think Egypt wanted to go to war with Israel. I don't think Nasser wanted to go with Israel. He had just massively overcommitted so many troops. What was it? It was like 40 to 70,000 troops, soldiers were already tired because of adventures in Yemen that had gone catastrophically, okay? I don't think that Nasser wanted a war. But just because we have one quote from Yaban, I'm forgetting the names. It's been a long time I've dove into this. Just because we have a quote from like the Israeli foreign minister, just because we have a quote from a guy saying that, or from Moshe Dayan or whoever the fuck saying like, oh, I don't think they wanted to fight us or whatever. There's more to it than that, right? It's not the fact that they did or didn't actually want to go to war. It's the fact that the public-facing rhetoric was that of a country that wanted to go to war. They were hyping everybody up around them wanting to go to war. They were taking steps that like very clearly counted as casus bellis for war, right? Egypt closed down the same strait that they'd closed in 56. Egypt dispelled all of the UN, UNEF, UN peacekeeping, UN, I forget the abbreviation. I think it's UNEF, emergency force, right? It's a UN emergency force. They had wiped away all of the UN emergency forces from the Sinai. They had begun a deployment of their military, across the Sinai into a position that Israel, had interpreted aggressively. Like they were taking steps towards war. Now, did he actually want to? No, but because they had like run the gamut so much with their lips, right? Because he'd spoken so much, and because word on the Arab street was that Nasser was weak or the King of Jordan was weak because these people were not really taking big steps. Whatever. There's so much context to all of this. This is the only thing I want to say. Okay, leave me with this. Okay, I hate having these debates now because people are left with so many dumb ideas. This is all I will say. Okay, let me summarize like my understanding of the last like 100 or so years of history. Okay. Jewish people, here's my broad understandings. You can go and argue and whatever, or do whatever you want with this, okay? Jewish people probably thought that they could go to the Levant, they could go to the Palestinian area, okay? They probably thought that they could go here and buy land and kind of shuffle the Arabs there around and it would be okay without any major conflict, without any major war. And they were probably willing to live with a decent chunk of them. Although the land that they bought, they wanted to work it. It was the Jewish conquest of labor, okay? So that's the first part, okay? Jews probably thought that they could do it with less trouble than would have been there, okay? But as time goes on, especially through the 20s, you've got a few massacres, especially up through the 30s when the Arabs are starting to get really mad because there's a lot of Jews coming in. And then once you hit 40 to 45, you've got like Jews that are now doing terrorisms against the Brits because the Brits are mad and they tell Jews to stop immigrating there because everybody's fighting and everybody's getting pissed off at all the people fighting down here, right? Once you hit 48, 47, 48, yeah, the Jews are like, okay, well, fuck us. Like the Arabs don't want us here. The Brits aren't helping us anymore. Nobody on the planet is helping us. Well, fuck it. Then we're just going to fucking fight. We're going to see how much we can get. And at that point, yeah, the Jews are fully all in, committed to doing whatever the fuck they can to defend their territory, right? And not only that, they do have grander plans. They want to, obviously. Same thing with the Arabs, right? Everybody wants to. Like the Arabs dreamed of creating like the pan-Arab state, and they probably wanted to extend back into Europe and everything. Everybody has these grand plans, but the Jews were always constrained by what was possible. The issue is that the Arabs were always willing to give them the excuse or the pretext for fighting. And there were times when Israel tried to bait at it a little bit. They absolutely did with some of the retaliatory attacks, definitely towards Syria in the mid-60s, and maybe even earlier on towards Egypt, maybe towards Jordan as well. I think that's where Arafat became popular. I think Arafat's popularity was, what was that big fight? Was it in 64? I feel like it was after the 6-Day War, but it might have been before. There was a huge reprisal that Israel tried to do into the territory of Jordan, and Arafat and his people won, really with the Jordanian army helping, but then, they decided to give all the credit to Arafat, and then the PLO starts to grow out of this and everything. But, I'm running through too much of this. Israel always wanted an excuse to expand. Arabs always gave them the excuse, okay? There are no, like, truly innocent parties here. That's all I'm trying to say. When I debate with people like this, don't come away thinking that my position is that the Israelis never wanted to expand their territory or that Israel never did no wrong. They did plenty of terrorisms, okay? Deir Yazzin's not even the worst example, right? The Sabrilla and Satir, whatever the fuck, massacre that happened in Lebanon is a way worse example. Or the shooting of people that were just trying to walk back to their homes in 48, 49 are really tragic examples, I think. Israel definitely hasn't conducted itself the best. And today, Israel's fucking all their shit up, okay? And if Israel fucks up as a country and dies now, it's their fault for being so arrogant to assume that they couldn't do anything with Palestinians as well. But also, the Arabs always wanted to fight too. Obviously, they don't want the fucking Jews here, and that's reasonable. I can understand why, but don't pretend that like the Arabs are super happy anyway. But regardless, listen, it's a rich history. There's a ton of shit that you can look into if you want. Just don't ever don't ever assume a guy that throws one quote at you never knows anything, okay? Because history doesn't evolve in quotes. It never works that way, ever. You wouldn't accept it today. Well, maybe if you're conservative, you would. You shouldn't accept it historically. Don't live in quotes, number one. Don't live in quotes. That's it. That's the most important thing. Number two, if somebody has to remind you over and over again about a book they read or how educated they are, then they're probably not. They probably haven't read the book, and they're probably not educated. Because if you were, then you would just like summarize the information that you read and then deliver it in a coherent, intelligent manner. We don't need to like spam quotes from books. Just tell me what you understand about a particular thing. But holy shit. Okay. I love y'all. Be careful. Stay safe. What's with the iron wall skepticism? I couldn't understand what he's trying to say. Oh, sorry. I don't know if Finkelstein originated this talking about or somebody else, but there's a scholar, there's a researcher guy called Pistol, Pistol, I think. Him and one other guy who I think were trying to sell a different type of security system in Israel. Some other sort of response to Aaron Wall. They published a kind of dumb study. I think Bellingcat goes through this. I think it was Bellingcat. They posted a study saying, oh, well, we think the Iron Wall is only like 20% effective. And Finkelstein brings this up in his Gaza book, and I think he brings it up in other books later on. But Finkelstein brings this point up that the Iron Wall is like 10 or 20% effective, and it's just a bullshit talking point from Israel to make themselves seem cooler than they actually are, but they aren't. It's fucking retarded, but yeah, there you go. Okay, be careful. Love you. Bye.